Bounce, slowly getting used to his new home, wrote some of the music you've been hearing. So my thanks to him and to you for listening to Assignment with me, Tim Mansell.
That was Assignment from the BBC. I'm Saroja Coelho, and this is CBC Radio 1. Have a great day.
Well, good morning, Manitoba, and welcome to a very special edition of Information Radio. Our community studio this morning, if you're watching on YouTube, you're seeing it, is this vast factory floor at Peerless Garments. We're on Notre Dame this morning, and we are going to be exploring what could be happening 12 days from now, and that is U.S. tariffs that are proposed. How will they affect this business and others? The Premier's on the program today. The head of Peerless is on the show today, and we're going to talk to manufacturers and exporters throughout. Welcome to our special edition of Information Radio. You're listening to CBC 89.3 FM, 990 AM on the app and YouTube. And it is cold again this morning in Winnipeg, so we have an extreme cold warning across all of the south, including our city, and that is much the same as we've had all week long. So it should break tomorrow, but today one more day of that really extreme cold. Let's say good morning to the team. Abby Adiemi and Kevin Ipatebo back at CBC 541 Portage. Here out on Notre Dame, give a wave, Corey Funk, to the folks watching on YouTube. Corey is our multifaceted everything. Director on site here this morning, teching the show, and you'll hear Corey covering the commute. All right, the commute should be pretty good. We're still dry with the conditions because it's so cold out there. Let's check what's developing in news, though. There have been some stories that are moving this morning. Hi there, Heather.
Good morning, yes. Well, a candidate to be the next leader of Manitoba's PCs says there is porn in schools in this province. Wally Dowdrich says there are school libraries with books describing bestiality and incest. He brought it up at a leadership debate last night in Brandon. He wouldn't say where these books are located, but says his leadership rival, Abi Khan, could have stopped it. So we'll hear more about that. And a Winnipeg psychologist is hearing from some travelers anxious after Monday's crash of that Delta Airlines plane. 21 people hurt when the plane from Minneapolis crashed and flipped while landing in Toronto. Those stories and more coming up in our next local news at 6:30.
Thank you, Heather.
You're welcome.
Heather Wells will be live with us throughout the program. And so, from gloves to workwear, windows and airplane parts, not to mention pork, steel, buses, hydroelectricity. How much trouble could Manitoba be in if these tariffs go into place? And maybe from a positive perspective, what needs to happen between now and March 4th to make sure we're in a better position? What is even possible? So a lot of questions to explore this morning. Also, we're going to talk about that hockey game tonight, Canada, U.S. and the Four Nations Cup. So we're going to hear about that and more coming up on World Report. Right now it is 30 seconds before 6 a.m.
Tell you the story of sitting with Johnny as he recorded his song and how a chance meeting that day led to Will's brand new album.
And that I see
That's coming up on Q, followed by Commotion with Elamine Abdel Mahmoud on CBC Radio 1, the CBC Listen app, and everywhere you get your podcasts.
This is World Report. Good morning, I'm Martina Fitzgerald. Hamas says it is ready to release all remaining hostages at the same time if Israel will commit to a second phase of the ceasefire agreement. The Palestinian militant group made the announcement this morning, just before handing over the bodies of 4 hostages, including children. The CBC's Sasha Petrusik brings us the latest from Jerusalem.
The music may have been upbeat in Khan Yunis this morning, but everything else was somber. Under cold rain, 4 black coffins carried by Hamas fighters, 2 of the caskets bearing the Bibas children, 4-year-old Ariel and his 9-month-old brother. They were kidnapped along with their mother, Shiri. She was in a 3rd coffin, a neighbor from their kibbutz in a 4th. Hamas says they died in an airstrike in southern Gaza. The Israeli army killed them, says Mujahideen, a Hamas fighter. Others in the crowd watching mourn Palestinian children who also died. Right until this week, many in Israel hoped the Bibas children had survived, says family friend Yiftach Cohen.
Shiri and the kids became a symbol. I still hope that they will be alive.
a symbol of hope for many in Israel, not knowing how many of the remaining 69 hostages survived 16 months in captivity. A shocking day, a day of grief, says Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu. Many here blame him for dragging out ceasefire negotiations and the hostage releases. But today, as some gathered in Hostage Square and others lined the route home for the coffins, the focus was on the youngest ones lost. Sasha Petrusik, CBC News, Jerusalem.
Federal employees in the United States are nervously watching the Department of Government Efficiency, also known as DOGE. The cost-cutting body has been slashing jobs and budgets across government agencies. Now, a memo first obtained by the Washington Post indicates the Pentagon is next. Cameron McIntosh is watching developments from our Washington Bureau. Good morning, Cam. What can you tell us?
The Washington Post is reporting it obtained a memo from Secretary of Defense Pete Hegseth calling for 8% cuts to the Pentagon budget for each of the next 5 years. Now, the Pentagon's budget is about $850 billion, so this is almost $70 billion a year. It's a lot of money. Now, Hegseth says these cuts aren't supposed to affect service personnel, people in uniform, nor Trump priorities like securing the southern border. But Hegseth says spending should reflect America's shifting priorities towards China, away from Ukraine and Europe.
Stark strategic realities prevent the United States of America from being primarily focused on the security of Europe.
Hegseth is also calling for costs to be offset by targeting, quote, wasteful DEI programs and climate change studies. In the memo dated Tuesday, Hegseth is telling the Pentagon to have a list of cuts, again, almost $70 billion worth, ready for Monday.
Do you mind, Cam, if we talk about the influence of Elon Musk's Department of Government Efficiency in all of this?
Yeah, so these cuts are outside of DOGE, but yes, Musk is looking at the Pentagon, again, targeting probationary employees, people who have been in their jobs less than 3 years. Now, those could be new hires or experienced people who transferred into a new job. The Department of Defense has about 900,000 civilian employees. Many of them are veterans. DOGE is trying to cut 10% of the federal workforce. It's already responsible for thousands of government firings across numerous departments amid criticisms of very little transparency and lots of questions over how decisions are even being made and who's making them, along with plenty of legal questions over Musk's authority, who wasn't even confirmed by Congress to be doing any of this. While President Trump has said Musk is in charge, a White House court filing says he's not even connected to DOGE. Martina?
Cameron McIntosh is in Washington for us this morning. Thanks, Cam.
My pleasure.
Musicians and dancers from the Turtle Mountain Band of the Chippewa tribe welcome Leonard Peltier home. The 80-year-old activist spent nearly 50 years in prison after being convicted of killing 2 FBI agents in South Dakota in 1975. Peltier fled to Canada before his trial 2 years later. He was extradited back to the U.S., found guilty, and given 2 life sentences. In one of his final acts as U.S. President, Joe Biden commuted Peltier's sentence. Peltier was emotional during a homecoming ceremony last night.
I'm so proud of the showing and support you've given me. I got a hard time keeping myself from crying.
Leonard Peltier was released from a Florida prison on Tuesday. He will serve the remainder of his sentence under house arrest in North Dakota. Alberta Premier Danielle Smith is defending her government in the face of healthcare corruption claims. It's accused of applying political pressure when the province's health authority awarded contracts. Smith confronted the controversy yesterday, and as Terry Reith reports, she pointed a finger at the health authority.
I want to address the procurement issues at Alberta Health Services.
Danielle Smith shot back at allegations of government interference in awarding contracts for chartered surgical facilities, promising a thorough investigation. But she also claimed the province's health authority, AHS, was resistant to using privately owned, publicly funded centres to help ease a surgical backlog. She says her health minister, Adriana LaGrange, and other government officials were doing their job.
The only role that the minister or government had was saying, "Are you done yet?" Have you got to the finish line yet?
The allegations stem from a lawsuit filed by the former CEO of the health authority, Athana Menzalopoulos, who says she was fired after she raised concerns about the procurement process 2 days before she was to meet with the Auditor General. The entire board of AHS was also fired 3 weeks later. Alberta's NDP opposition is not relenting. Leader Naheed Nenshi is calling for a public inquiry led by a judge, and he wants the health minister fired.
This isn't going away, Premier. You may think you're making it go away. It is not going away. Albertans deserve to know how we're managing their health system.
An internal investigation, which will involve an outside agency, will take months, says the Premier. In the meantime, she has suspended the awarding of new contracts until providers have been cleared of any wrongdoing. Terry Reith, CBC News, Edmonton.
In Nova Scotia, the calls to better address intimate partner violence are becoming louder. Advocates rallied in Halifax last night demanding more support and provincial funding for victims, including in recent months 6 women in Nova Scotia. As Kayla Hounsell reports, despite being invited, the Premier did not show up.
No more silence!
Bundled against a cold winter day, they marched in the streets demanding action.
End the violence!
From October to January, 6 women in Nova Scotia were killed by their intimate partners.
Let's remember, Peyton Pick.
Peyton Pick was the most recent. The 22-year-old's body found in a home that had been set on fire. Her boyfriend charged with second-degree murder and arson with disregard to human life. Her mother, Norma Jean Pick, is also calling for change, inviting CBC News into her daughter's celebration of life, hoping to raise awareness.
She was taken from us January 11th of this year by someone she loved and trusted.
Advocates are calling for everything from early intervention to education in schools and changes in legislation. Christina Fifield is a trauma therapist.
So we're asking Tim Houston and members of our current government to really prioritize core funding.
She says she invited Nova Scotia Premier Tim Houston to speak at the rally, but he didn't respond.
I get a lot of invites, to be honest. I mean, it's a day of the legislature. It's pretty scheduled in advance, but I'm happy to meet with people.
Gwendolyn Brown is a survivor.
It hurts my heart that he's not here.
Demonstrators hope their voices will be loud enough to prevent even one more death. Kayla Hounsell, CBC News, Halifax.
And that is the latest national and international news from World Report. For news anytime, just go to cbcnews.ca. I'm Martina Fitzgerald. This is CBC News.
Good morning, Manitoba, and welcome to a special edition of Information Radio. We are live, and if you're watching on YouTube, you're getting quite a sight because I'm on the factory floor at Peerless Garments on Notre Dame. Thanks for joining us here on CBC 89.3 FM, 990 AM on the app and on YouTube. So why are we here? Well, if you do see this shot, you see we're surrounded by fabrics and threads and garments and military gear, all made here in Manitoba. But some of these things are made for export to the United States. What's that going to mean in 12 days if the proposed tariffs come into effect? We'll explore that and more at our special show today. Also, the Premier of Manitoba will be on to talk about how he's planning to help businesses if these tariffs go into effect. Wab Canoe has talked about things like tax deferrals. Will that be necessary? We have much to explore. As over 1,400 companies manufacture here in our province. Stay with us for a special edition of Information Radio. Now, specifically this hour, I want to talk about Canada's inflation rate that ticked up 1.9% in January, driven by rising energy costs. So we're going to have an interview about that. We're also going to be talking about something locally completely different to manufacturing and tariffs. We're looking for a poet laureate, or more specifically, the Winnipeg Arts Council is looking for the next Poet Laureate. What does that mean? What does it take to be the next Poet Laureate in this city? We'll find out with a live interview in a moment. Right now, though, let's go back to 541 Portage Avenue. Heather Wells is at CBC this morning with our developing news.
Good morning. Well, one of the candidates seeking to be leader of Manitoba's PCs is worried about books in this province's schools. Wally Dowdrett says some libraries have pornographic books describing bestiality and incest. He brought it up last night at a leadership debate in Brandon. We're going to hear more about what was said. And some students at the University of Manitoba say they would like to see more Indigenous representation in faculty and in content taught in their courses. Those stories and more coming up in our next local news at 6:30.
All right. Thank you, Heather.
You're welcome.
Abby Adiyemi, I thought maybe this morning as we were exploring the forecast that we'd luck out and it would be like, weather was going to break tomorrow, but no, this Thursday morning it's warm.
Still
but no,
one more day.
Overnight
gets cold, and then as you get into the day, it warms up. So we still have that extreme cold one in effect for much of southern Manitoba, with that wind chill still in the range of -40s and even lower. But as mentioned, relief on the way. Temperatures begin to improve as we get into today, leading into that much warmer anticipated weekend that we have ahead of us. Right now, Winnipeg, -23, clear outside. You can see the stars. For today, sunny skies in the forecast. We'll get to a high of -15, though it feels much colder this morning. If you're stepping out, the wind chill feels like -32, and then things begin to improve as you get into the day. Just be mindful, frostbite is still a risk. And then more clouds tonight, and we drop to that low of -18. To sum it up, cold across the province, wind chill making it feel colder, but for the city, let's just say it's going to be that sunny stats with that cold conditions and that high of -15 with light breeze. Right now, -23 in Winnipeg.
All right, we'll take it for now, and hope is so close now, Abby, that warmer weather.
We've been brave.
We have been brave.
So let's just let this one day go.
You might see Corey Funk in the shot here if you're watching on YouTube. Corey, of course, joins us now on the radio. Our drive over, this is what we're going to trade off, though. It's going to get warm and the drive's going to get pesky.
Yes, yeah, it could. You could get a little bit more icy conditions, especially on those roads as things kind of do warm up. That sun making that light.
And layer. Right now it's clear, cold, good driving.
Yeah, exactly. I haven't heard of any major issues out there. Highways look okay, but you can call me here at the factory. Cool technology. If you see anything going on, that number to call 204-788-3093.
So we're soon probably going to be surrounded by some of the humming of these sewing machines that are surrounding me. There's 87 people that work at Peerless overall, and I'm just seeing workers coming on for their first shift now as they come in the doors here. Special thank you to Bev, who let us in very early this morning. She's worked here for Peerless for 22 years, and also, of course, to Albert Alessi, the owner, so he'll join us in the next hour. Right now, let's switch gears to that Poet Laureate conversation, shall we? Do you know a poet who can paint amazing pictures using only words? Well, the Winnipeg Arts Council is looking for the next Poet Laureate. This will be the city's fourth. Their role is vital in representing Winnipeg's literary community on a larger scale. And to talk about it, Dominic Lloyd is with us, Program and Arts Development Manager over at the Winnipeg Arts Council. Good morning.
Good morning, Marcy.
So some people might not really understand what a Poet Laureate is. They might think, and they might also not apply because they might think that couldn't be me. So can you explain a little bit about the role?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, traditionally it was a sort of it has that connotation of being somebody who, lies around on a couch and composes odes in their head. But really what it is, it's a storyteller, and it's somebody who, raises the profile of Winnipeg and of Winnipeg's identity and of the arts in Winnipeg, all, as you say, through words.
What do they actually do, so to speak? Like if someone's thinking about that's the qualities, but what does it actually mean in terms of either performance or producing pieces of work?
Totally. Well, it's not a full-time job, I'll tell you that. It could be if you wanted it to. Their job really is to create work and to create work that reflects the life of the city and whether it's in like an official capacity, sometimes we ask them to create and compose and perform at an official function like at the Mayor's Luncheon for the Arts, which happens every summer in June. but sometimes it's just to, be there to help Winnipeggers reflect on who they are and what they want to be. It really is about being a poet.
Can you share some of the past poets, and what they've done in their roles? We've had a couple of them on the air. I know that they did an ode to winter, and we've heard, different folks coming in. But can you share some of the highlights in your view?
Yeah, for sure. Di Brandt was the first poet laureate, and she created some work about winter. She created a wonderful suite of poems about Portage and Maine, always topical here in our fair city. Duncan McCurdy was the second poet laureate, and he did some really awesome things as well. He became poet laureate just as lockdown started, and so he spent a lot of his time as poet laureate on Zoom. But he visited classrooms and politicians and businesses and that kind of thing, and just brought words to them. He also created a whole volume of poems, which we actually published in 2022. Around the discovery of graves in Kelowna, and he created a work of poetry to reflect on that as it relates to people all across the country, Indigenous and non-Indigenous.
Yeah.
And of course, our most recent poet laureate, Chim Undy, has. She's just a firebrand. She's done everything under the sun. She's been everywhere, done everything. She won a Governor General's Award for her first book, which came out just under a year ago, Scientific Marvel. And then, of course, just as she reached the end of her tenure as Winnipeg Poet Laureate, she was named the Parliamentary Poet Laureate of Canada.
Amazing.
So, Winnipeggers out there doing stuff.
Yeah, and it was actually Duncan that wrote that poem I was talking about the cold, and it was specific because we had this Winnipeg at Winter classic poem, and he rewrote like a 2020, I think at the time 2022 version of that poem with our city as it is today through his lens. So, can you tell us a little bit about the timeline for this? Like, when will we know who the next poet laureate is?
Well, what we're hoping to do, and what we've done is it's not an application process so much. It's just you can nominate another person or you can nominate yourself. It has to be a poet. Like, it has to be somebody who's actually done some poetry before. But really, quite simply, you can just send us an email and say, this is why this person should be poet laureate. This is why I think this person would make a great poet laureate. Give us some direction to where we can find their work. And then what we're going to do is put together a group of folks from the literary and poetry communities in the city, and they're going to review everything and they'll make the selection. And our hope is to have that person announced in April, which is National Poetry Month here in Canada.
So what's the deadline to get those emails, and what's the email address?
The email address is info@winnipegarts.ca. Winnipeg is all spelled out. Arts has an S on the end of it. And the deadline, we'd like to hear from people by Friday, March 14th.
All right. Thanks a lot, Dominic, for getting up early and sharing with our listeners how they can put someone's name forward.
Yeah, please come to our website, winnipegarts.ca, and thanks very much for having me on to talk about it, Marcy.
All right. We'll talk to you again. Take care.
Take care. Bye-bye.
Dominic Lloyd, Program and Arts Development Manager at Winnipeg Arts Council. So March 14th, the deadline to put someone's name forward and nominate. And that is info, the email itself, info@winnipegarts.ca is where you can send that. And also you can check out their website to repeat some of the nomination, things that they're looking for in nominees. For information on how to nominate someone for the role of Poet Laureate.
In the world of marketing, there are things that are forbidden. It's illegal to use certain sounds. In some countries, there are rules around using national anthems in commercials. And forget about using Winnie the Pooh in China.
Oh, bother.
Forbidden branding on Under the Influence with Terry O'Reilly. Thursday morning at 11:30, 3:30 p.m. in Newfoundland. And on demand on CBC Listen.
Well, look at that weather out there. A clear sky again. It's minus 23 in Winnipeg and winds are calm. Over in Brandon, clear. Minus 31 feels like minus 37 right now. In Thompson, we've got a clear sky as well and minus 26. Cold across the province. Extreme cold here in the south. We've got those wind chills that are going to feel more like minus 40 for most of the morning. So we'll see what the rest of the day is going to bring. Winnipeg's actual daytime high today is right around minus 15 degrees for the city of Winnipeg. And so that means with wind chill, as I've been mentioning, minus 32 is more what it's going to feel like this morning. We're live here at Peerless Garments. We're on the factory floor here. We're going to be exploring potential tariffs that could come into effect in 12 days. But really, we're going to be exploring what's made in our province. And we talk so much about supporting local. We thought we better get out the door and be right in the middle of the story and really look at what companies have are not only doing business now, but in the case of Peerless, have been doing business for years and years. So this is one of those companies that's been around here on Notre Dame for many, many years. And so Albert Alessi, the owner, just walked in actually. So he's going to be on the air with us in the next hour as our workers start to come in and get ready to get those sewing machines humming here around us. At 6:40, by the way, we're going to hold up some of these products and show you some of the things that are made specifically here. So we'll do that for you. If you're watching on YouTube, you'll get a view, and of course we'll describe them for you on radio. Well, next on the show, let's talk about something that a lot of Canadians are going to be watching tonight, and that is the hockey game. Canada and the United States facing off in Boston for bragging rights in the highly anticipated championship game of the Four Nations Hockey Tournament. So the two teams have already literally come to blows last weekend, right? Fiery round one Robin game with 3 fights, I think within the first, 2 minutes or something. Let's talk about what's going on and why the hockey rink is where a new wave of Canadian patriotism is playing out, and maybe tension. Tim Elcombe is with us, professor of kinesiology and a fellow at the Balsillie School of International Affairs at Wilfrid Laurier University. Good morning to you.
Good morning.
Why do you think patriotism so often for Canada plays out on the ice, specifically against the U.S. and in big games?
Yeah, well, I mean, I think there's a long, long history ever since international sport, began. It's the one thing where, Canadians put on the uniform, the maple leaf, right, and Canada across the chest, and so they represent us. And what else do all Canadians sort of cheer for the same thing at the same time and sort of on the same team before? So sport is this one place where we get to feel Canadian. We sort of are all together. We're in one sort of cheering for one sort of united group at the same time. And of course, it's this nice thing where it's a few hours and then we win or we lose at the end of it. And of course, especially we talk about hockey, we're talking about our game, the game that we invented, the game that we've been the dominant power throughout the time. And so all those things sort of fit together to make it into this, this really sort of national identity marker for us.
I want to talk about a couple of things. So first of all, there's the booing, which a lot of people are focusing on. Some people don't like, they say it's classless to boo anyone's anthem. But why don't we focus on the fact that during that game and all of the Canadian games, the singing of the anthem was like louder and clearer and en français, and everyone knew every word. Of course, this is in Montreal. But what do you make of the aspect of how much, the participation of the fans, that visceral, passionate feeling is coming through, and how much it's just directly tied to the tariff situation, frankly, and the sovereignty questions?
Yeah, I mean, it's one of the fascinating things about sport is, especially from a spectator perspective, being in the arena seems to give us license to do things that we would never otherwise do, whether that's, if we think about just screaming at officials or yelling at people in public, it sort of is already this really unique space. And then you add these symbolic markers like national anthems. And, where else do we, especially as adults, listen to the national anthem, sing along to the national anthem? It's at sporting events typically. And so you add all those things together, then you put in the political tensions, and so in this unique environment, it's almost as if, booing an anthem in any other environment most people would think would be very strange and as you said, inappropriate, but it's almost because it's happening in the sporting realm, it almost seems to be accepted. And so I think it's, and the singing along, again, it's that idea that, this game means something more. It's not just a hockey spectacle. This is sort of a Canadian pride, a Canadian identity. And so whether or not it's booing to sort of show the Americans, especially Donald Trump, that we're not going to be sort of manipulated by him, and at the same time demonstrating this pride in our nation, it's all, again, it's happening in this symbolic world of hockey.
It's interesting because I've had some conversations with people that are conflicted about the aspect of the fighting in these games, because on one hand it's being sort of celebrated as we're so mad, with the Americans, we're going to throw our gloves down and look at these 3 fights. I mean, that speaks to a whole bunch of things, but other people say, once again, it's fighting in hockey is, that question comes up about whether or not we want a whole nation of people cheering for, punching someone in the head. What sense do you make of that? Because on the other hand, the conflict is a lot of people who, were questioning why they were cheering during those fights also felt this pride you're talking about.
Yeah, it's a visceral response that sport gives us. I mean, it's been described as war. International sport's been described as war minus the guns. Again, it's this idea that Canada is standing up for itself, and no other place would we accept this, but the ice rink or sport in general sort of gives license to these things. And so I think there's that visceral response that people have had. These are Canadians standing up for each other. I think part of the fighting, too, was a message, a sporting message from the players, because, this has replaced All-Star Weekend. And if you ever watch All-Star games, whether it's the NBA or the NHL, players barely try because no one wants to get hurt. So I think part of it was a message that this game was going to mean something. It was going to matter. It wasn't just going to be, sort of players skating around and not trying to get hurt. So I think there was that part of it as well. But yeah, in terms of our acceptance of violence, it's, again, it's this sport creates this artificial world where the boundaries seem to change and shift.
Let's talk about Donald Trump, because President Trump was invited to attend this game by Team USA's general manager. There's a lot of layers at play there. I've had some listeners in Manitoba write to me and say that they absolutely don't want him in the country, never mind at the game. If he does show up, what would this add to the mix?
Yeah, I think it just raises the temperature even more. I think it demonstrates that this is more than a hockey game. Even more, I wouldn't be surprised if he shows up in Boston. I mean, the reality is, sport has been an important part of Trump's branding right from the beginning, especially the NFL and college football. He really attached himself on his first term with his identity in terms of being pro football. Standing up to the athletes who were kneeling during the national anthem was a big part of his first presidency. Pushing to get college and NFL back during the pandemic. And so, it's this idea of American power and exceptions, which is why football is so important to him. But I think, the fact that there were fights in the first game, that it's the Americans challenging the Canadians at their sport, I think all the symbols are there. It's the perfect mix in terms of the kind of sort of what he would be looking to do.
And I'm getting it wrong here because, of course, we had games in Montreal, but tonight's game, as you pointed out, is in Boston. Is that right?
Correct. Yes, that's right.
Yeah, so pardon me for saying that. So that adds a whole other layer. We'll see whether or not, what it sounds like in Boston and how many Canadians made the trip there also. Who do you think is going to win?
Well, Canada's going to win. I think
like go on the CBC and say something else, I dare you, right? But
yeah, that's right. I think the talent on display has been exceptional. I mean, the layers here is the hockey has been exceptional, been outstanding. And then you add this international competitions like this tend not to have fights, and all of a sudden we added fights, and that brings, fighting has really been reduced in hockey, and all of a sudden it's returned, and is this going to happen again, or is that sort of a one-off? Is the crowd in Boston going to boo the Canadian national anthem? Do people in the U.S. think that this is a bigger than a hockey issue, or is this just a hockey game? There's so many layers of questions that are going to be part of this.
Well, we'll see. And we're all conflicted in Winnipeg, of course, because of Hellebuck. So there is that, too. All right. Thanks a lot, Tim.
Thank you.
Tim Alcombe, professor of kinesiology and fellow at the Balsillie School of International Affairs at Wilfrid Laurier University. The game tonight, Canada-U.S. Four Nations Cup in Boston. Coming up, we have business news on Information Radio here on CBC. Chrisley Ramlakan is going to join us talking about what implementing a guaranteed basic income could do in Canada. So stay tuned. We'll talk more about that. We'll also get the opening day's markets. And speaking of business, if you're just tuning in this morning, I'm Marcy Marcusa with Corey Funk, and we are live on location at Peerless Garments, and that's on Notre Dame here in Winnipeg as we explore the potential tariffs that could come into play in 12 days here. And we also celebrate Manitoba manufacturers. So stay tuned. We will have more from the factory floor coming up after your CBC Winnipeg News.
This is CBC News. Good morning. I'm Heather Wells in Winnipeg. At 6:30, it is minus 23. And this, we hope, is the last time this line is repeated. An extreme cold warning covering much of southern Manitoba today. In Winnipeg, sunshine, a high of minus 15. A warm-up is on the way. A candidate to be the next leader of Manitoba's PCs says there is porn in this province's schools. Wally Dowdrich says there are school libraries with books describing bestiality and incest. He brought it up at a leadership debate last night in Brandon. Dowdrich wouldn't say where these books are located, but says his leadership rival, Abi Khan, could have stopped it.
It was brought to his attention when he was Minister of Heritage Culture, and he did nothing.
Khan says Dowdrich's comments are factually incorrect. He says municipalities or school boards have the autonomy to choose which books belong in their libraries. Khan says the former PC government tried to develop rules around putting books about sensitive topics into age-appropriate areas of libraries, but the PCs were defeated in the 2023 election before those rules could be finalized. Some students at the University of Manitoba say they would like to see more Indigenous representation in faculty and content taught in their courses. Noah Crossman is co-president of the Métis University Students Association. He studies psychology at the U of M. Crossman wants to see two different ways of learning woven together in his studies at university.
But it's definitely tough, and it's because, from a broad perspective, science and the university in general is very colonial, and just inherently. And so it's hard to blend those two knowledge systems for sure.
The university introduced an Indigenous course requirement for Faculty of Arts in 2021. The school says sciences are heading in that direction. A Brandon man has been sentenced to 9 months in custody in an intimate images case. The man uploaded sexually explicit videos of his then-pregnant ex-girlfriend to a popular porn website. He did so without her consent, according to a recent decision filed in provincial court. The decision says the man posted multiple videos to his Pornhub account. He restricted views to the account's 18 friends and 7 subscribers and texted his ex a link to one of the videos. Neither the man nor woman were named in the decision. In a victim impact statement, the woman says she felt profound devastation knowing such intensely intimate videos had been posted online. Canada's ambassador to the U.S. is hinting we might avoid U.S. President Donald Trump's tariffs by continuing to tackle illegal migration and fentanyl trafficking at the border. Ambassador Kirsten Hillman.
The president was pleased with the announcements we made, but not only the announcements, the progress that we are making in the fight against fentanyl, in the fight against irregular migration, illegal migration. For example, illegal migration from Canada to the United States is down 90% in recent months. So I'm getting signals that the work that we are doing and the results that we are achieving is well received.
Trump has given a March 4th deadline to Canada and threatens 25% tariffs on all Canadian goods sold in the U.S. A grim ceremony in Gaza this morning. The Palestinian militant group Hamas handed over the remains of 4 Israeli hostages who died in captivity. They were said to include an 84-year-old peace activist, a mother, her baby, and her second son who was kidnapped when he was 4 years old. Music played while a large crowd of Palestinian spectators cheered. The bodies of the Israeli hostages were placed in black coffins on a stage before being handed over to the Red Cross. Delta Airlines says it is offering $30,000 to the passengers of a plane that crashed at Toronto's Pearson Airport this week. A spokesman for the airline says the money has no strings attached and does not affect the rights of passengers to pursue compensation. 80 people were on board the flight from Minneapolis. Everyone survived. Now, a Winnipeg psychologist is hearing from some travelers after Monday's crash of that Delta plane, saying they are anxious about flying. Dr. Rahman Abdurrahman says it's normal for people to have concerns, especially at a time of heightened overall anxiety in the world.
Watching these plane crashes, it's understandable that people are going to feel anxious to fly. But we want to be careful that, those worries don't lead into significant anxiety disorders or avoidances that start to impact our everyday lives and our ability to carry out what we need to do.
Now, one aviation expert calls the string of crashes an unfortunate coincidence of timing. Scott Hamilton tells CBC's The Current, air travel today is safer than it's ever been due to, quote, experience and lessons learned from decades of accidents. You can find more national and international news coming up on World Report at 7 and more Manitoba news at cbc.ca/Manitoba.
All right. Thank you, Heather.
You're welcome.
Well, look at this. I'm on the factory floor of Peerless Garments. We're live on radio, and you're about to see that walking into the shot on YouTube is Mr. Albert Alessi, the owner here, who is getting us coffee, which is lovely of you. Albert, let's put some headsets on you and get you on here for a second. I know we're going to do a full interview after. We'll turn you this way by Corey, so the camera's over there right behind you, just before we check weather. Good morning. How are you doing?
Good. How are you?
I'm very well. So just remind people how old this business is. Out on Notre Dame, by the way, Peerless Garments.
This business is 84 years old.
Yeah. And you've grown it immeasurably since you first took it on.
Well, I've been here for 55 years. It was not owned by me, but when I came in, I started in Peerless on the floor, and I worked myself up to be the CEO, and I was a part owner. I had shares in the company, and then I've been here for 55 years owning the business.
Yeah. What does it mean to you to own a business in Canada? And how concerned are you about the tariffs?
Oh, we are concerned quite a bit. We're concerned. I mean, the whole Canada is concerned. It's not only us and that. Every manufacturer is concerned. Every person, every company who relies on importing products from the United States or exporting products from the United States is the same thing. We go both ways. We export and we import.
Well, we're going to hear about some of those numbers, what gets exported and imported from Peerless a little later. We also have the premier coming up on the show, by the way. WAP Canoe is going to be here live on the factory floor. And we may get some workers to talk to us, but we promised we wouldn't interrupt their day, and they're just sitting down at some sewing machines around us as well. Thank you for having us here.
You're very welcome.
Yeah, CBC Live on location. This is our community studio for this morning, 89.3 FM, 990 AM on the app, and you might be watching on YouTube. All right, it's time to get into our weather forecast. We drove over here to Peerless, and I can tell you it's cold, but it was a good clean drive. You know, the streets are still dry. Abby, what's the temperature going to be today?
I got good news for you first, Mercy. Guess. Take a guess.
The weather forecast didn't change. It's actually going to get better?
The extreme cold warning has ended.
How many days have we been under that extreme cold warning, right? It's officially over.
Over 2 weeks, I guess. But now it's over now. No more across the southern regions. I can see that red I've been staring at for like 2 weeks is officially gone. So it's ended, but it's still cold outside. It's going to start to warm up as we get into today. Then you start feeling it like from tomorrow into the weekend. But for Winnipeg at this time, temperature, it's still at minus 23. Expect plenty of sunshine today. The wind chill is still a factor. It's going to feel like minus 32. And then later tonight, we'll see some clouds move in. Similar conditions we're seeing in the Pembina Valley region from Morden all the way down to the U.S. border. Temperatures around minus 23, 24. We go to see the wind chill around minus 30. In western Manitoba, Brandon is actually frosty at minus 33 at this point. Sunny skies in the forecast. Some light winds would come with that. The wind chill will feel like minus 40 for folks in Brandon this morning. And then conditions will improve as you get into the weekend. In the Parkland region, we're looking at temperatures around minus 26 for Dauphin and surrounding areas with sunny skies. And the forecast for today, the winds will pick up, though, making it feel much colder this morning. The wind chill feels like minus 25. In the Interlake region, Gimli and the surrounding areas, we're seeing temperatures around minus 27. Sunny skies also in the forecast. The winds will be picking up, making it feel like minus 33 this morning. In the Power Flin Flon and areas around that region, we're seeing temperatures hover around minus 33, 34. Sunny skies also in the forecast. Highs will be around minus 14. Tonight, there's a very high chance of just light snow in that part of the province. And then you travel up now to Thompson and Churchill. Temperatures, we're looking at temperatures in Thompson sitting at minus 26, while Churchill is sitting at minus 18. The wind chills still on the very cold side, but frostbite is a thing. So to summarize, the cold is still there, but the extreme cold warning has ended.
All right, let's rip it up then, Abby. No more extreme cold. I've had it with this stuff.
Rip that paper off.
I literally did. All right, let's go to Corey Funk for a quick traffic, and then Corey's got a bit of a show and tell here for us.
Yes, so you've been a very quiet commute overall. Haven't heard many major issues. Lovely run-in this morning. Sidewalks are clear, roads are clear, highways pretty clear as well. But if you run into an issue, give me a call, 204-788-3093.
Now, the show and tell, and Corey will describe this for radio listeners, but you can see this on YouTube, is because we've grabbed a couple of things that Peerless makes here. In case you're curious what garments they manufacture, some of the fabrics might give you a clue for who they work with. Describe what this is.
Yes, so this is, I guess this must be a pillow that a worker must have made at some point for just comfort. But it's made out of this tactical camouflage, classic military, green, black.
Camo.
It's
Yep.
camo.
Digital camo. Yep.
Exactly. And that kind of reflects a lot of the contracts that Peerless has. A lot of them are government contracts. Transport Canada, military. They make jackets. I'm holding in my hand right now. It's actually on the website. It's actually called a stealth jacket. It's Gore-Tex. It's waterproof.
Got it.
A lot of it that really practical,
So put
hardy.
that on because we can kind of hear the thickness of it.
Oh, yeah, here. I don't know if you can hear it here exactly.
Kind of hear it.
Yeah, but this one still has some work to be done on it, clearly.
Yeah.
But
that's probably military grade as well.
yes,
then, perhaps.
perhaps. Yeah, it's something just meant to kind of withstand the elements.
Of
We
course.
might miss
Of course,
something.
the arm is turned
I know,
inside
of
out,
course.
right,
There
when
we
we
go.
say put it on.
Exactly, but here it is.
Okay.
Yeah, so still some work to be done on it, but so this is a lot of what it is. These kind of more industrial kind of stuff that they make here.
Can you talk about, before we turn to business news, the section we're in right now? Because on the camera, if you're watching on YouTube, and I'll describe for radio, we're surrounded by some very specific colors, 3 of them in particular.
Yes, red, white, and blue.
These fabrics.
Yes.
Stacks of fabrics, red, white, and blue behind us. And this is actually the American section?
There's a lot of these are destined for the U.S. What they are, they're kind of chemical splatter.
Like a suit that you wear in a lab.
Exactly. And this is the stuff that comes from the big contract they have going to the U.S.
Got
so
it.
this is stuff that if tariffs come on, it's going to get a lot more expensive to ship. And this is a contract that Albert Alessi, I'm sure he'll talk about it after 7, is really worried about. He doesn't know what will happen if tariffs come on, if they'll lose that contract, and if they do, what will that mean for the workers here? Because a lot of people are employed because of that multi-million-dollar U.S. contract to make these this protective gear.
6:42 a.m. We're on site at Peerless Garments on the factory floor. That's Corey Funk. I'm Marcy Marcusa. Thanks for being with us on CBC. Let's actually turn to some other business news now. If you're a regular listener, you know that Christely Ramlakan is joining us now via Zoom, and she's here with her report. Good morning.
Hey, good morning, Marcy.
So your first story is about what implementing a guaranteed basic income could actually do and what the impact would be in Canada.
Yeah, that's right. So the government's fiscal watchdog says a guaranteed basic income program at the federal level could cut poverty rates by up to 40%. So a new report from the Parliamentary Budget Officer says a family in the lowest earning group could expect to receive an average of $6,100 in annual disposable income through such a program. But higher earners could see their income levels drop because of changes in the tax system to implement this kind of support. So the report says the cost of sending out checks could reach $107 billion, but the vast majority would be offset by cuts or changes to tax credits. And also the basic personal amount would be lowered, which is the amount of income people can claim free of tax. So the PBO says the net cost to the federal government would be between $3.6 billion and $5 billion, depending on the exact model used. And, this analysis did not even look at other impacts of lowering poverty, such as possibly less pressure on healthcare or social services. So this analysis is based on Ontario's 2017 Basic Income Pilot Project. And, the federal NDP pushed for a guaranteed livable basic income with a private member's bill that failed to pass through the House of Commons last fall. And also a similar bill was still in limbo in the Senate when Parliament was prorogued in January.
Let's go to another story. A well-known Canadian tourist attraction is actually making moves. What's going on?
Yeah, that's right. So the city of Niagara Falls has approved an application by Marineland to break apart its property so it can take out mortgages and raise money to move its animals and also operate the park. So Marineland has said it is transitioning to new ownership, but a lawyer for the park says it has not yet been sold and the business needs money right now. So Marineland says it has secured third-party financing that requires the owner to remove the marine animals from the property. Now, 18 belugas, 1 orca whale, and 1 dolphin have died at Marineland since late 2019. The park has long defended its treatment of animals and says the deaths are part of the natural cycle of life. But it is believed 31 belugas are still at Marineland, the last remaining captive whales in Canada. So after the animals are removed, the park would then merge these land parcels back together. And Marcy, several animal rights organizations have offered to help relocate these animals.
Finally, this morning, before we look at the markets and the dollar, Apple has launched a new low-cost iPhone.
Yeah, that's right. So the tech giant launched the iPhone 16e yesterday. So the company is trying to win back mid-market customers. Sales of Apple phones dropped last quarter, and sales of its budget line of phones have plummeted. And this also comes as Android competitors are adding AI to their devices as well. So the 16e will cost $899 in Canada. Now that is $320 more than the previous entry-level phone, the SE. But aside from having no wide-angle camera lens, one missing button, and a slightly different display, the 16e actually looks much like its pricier siblings. And it will include a powerful chip to run Apple Intelligence with access to ChatGPT. Now, business analysts think dropping a low-level price point in favor of a mid-level one helps Apple as a premium brand. But in the Canadian market, others aren't so sure that approach is going to work because, well, the budget and regular lines are just too similar to justify that price difference. And they say the 16e could just cut into sales of the regular 16 and 16 Pro models.
I love that we're calling it, affordable model, quote unquote.
I know, affordable for
right? Yeah.
$900.
Yeah. All right. What are the markets telling us this morning?
In Europe, stocks are rising. Germany is up. The UK is down. France is up. And Asia markets are down. So Japan, Shanghai, and Hong Kong are all down. Oil is up 4 cents to $72.29 US per barrel. Gold is up $9.50 to $2,942.50 US per ounce. And the dollar is up 0.13 of a cent to 70.4 cents US.
All right. Thanks very much, Crystal Lee.
Okay, thanks, Marcy.
That's Crystal Lee Ramlakan with Business News. She just mentioned the dollar being up just slightly. After 7 o'clock, from our live show here at the factory floor of Peerless Garments on Notre Dame, we are going to be talking to a company that makes the infamous garbage mitts and a whole bunch of other different kinds of leather gloves and goods. I'm talking about Raber glove, and they're going to be joining us to talk about why the biggest thing that they're worried about when it comes to the States is not necessarily tariffs, because they've made a decision not to export to the States. But they have issues with the dollar, as you can imagine, because it has been low, to say the least, against the U.S. dollar. So stay tuned. We'll have that as our special broadcast focusing on manufacturing and business in Manitoba continues.
People say work hard and the money will come. Working hard can be hard, can't it, honey? And being broke ain't fun. But you say that it will be okay, it will be fine. Just give it time like a fine wine. Close your eyes, 'cause I don't want you to see me like this. My uncle's asking me, how's the music going? Are you making any money like that? Not making much money. Have you considered going back to school? You fool, be cool. He doesn't mean that, but he says that it will be okay and it will be fine, but you won't survive long on pennies and dimes, and he's right. Yeah, I don't want him to see me like this. I don't want him to
A little ditty from Prince Edward Island-born songwriter, guitarist, and producer Logan Richard with See Me Like This on CBC 89.3 FM, 990 AM on the app and on YouTube. We're live with Information Radio on CBC from the garment floor, factory floor here, where workers are making garments all around me at sewing machines and such. We're Peerless Garments, and stay with us as we explore manufacturing in Manitoba. Right now, though, let's talk about money. Canada's inflation rate has been steady for a long time, but it saw a small uptick in January, rising to 1.9% from 1.8 in December. Now, that's Stats Canada's numbers. This small increase is mostly driven by rising energy prices. But with those U.S. tariffs looming 12 days from now, right, it's unclear what to expect next. For some insight, Moshe Landers with a senior lecturer in the Department of Economics over at Concordia University. Good morning.
Good morning. You made me feel nostalgic there with that musical interlude I could see from the CBC studios, my old office at the University of Winnipeg. So I miss it, but I could do without the snow.
Yeah, Moshe's on Zoom this morning, so he can see the shot back at studios. Actually, where I'm standing this morning, I'm surrounded by factory and business and workers. And so speaking of folks that are really worried about these tariffs, we're going to explore that today. What do you think's behind the slight increase in Canada's inflation rate then, Moshe?
It was energy prices. Canadians remembered what winter is supposed to feel like in Canada. And so it was coast to coast to coast that we had cold, snowy weather. Everybody reaches for the thermostat. That's going to drive all energy prices higher. And even though food prices fell, something that we haven't talked about in a long time, and even though the GST holiday was in place and people were substituting taxable goods for non-taxable goods, the increase in energy prices was just too much to overcome. But like you said, it was a mild uptick. It only went to 1.9%. It's well within the Bank of Canada's comfort zone of 1 to 3%. It's almost right in the middle there.
Should Canadians expect prices for some consumer goods might also go up a bit, though, in the near future?
For sure. Inflation's not going to stop. It's just not going to be the 8% that we saw in the middle of 2022. Inflation of 1.9% means that on average, prices will rise. So some will rise faster, some slower, some will outright fall. Like I said, food prices fell. But yeah, they should have a reasonable expectation that prices will continue to rise. Part of it will be shaped by their own decision-making. The recent wave of patriotism because of the hurt feelings of the Trump tariff threat, I get. But unfortunately, that will be inflationary. And so we'll see probably in the February numbers when they come out that there was some element of inflation that was triggered by our own response. That is something that can be avoided going forward. But some stuff can't be. Just that's the way the economy moves.
What's your best advice? It's anyone's guess what's going to happen next here, but what are your thoughts on how Canada maybe should be positioning and what consumers should be thinking about?
Well, you can't predict crazy. And unfortunately, the U.S. president is crazy. I don't think that he knows what he's going to do from one day to the next when it comes to economic policy. His numbers are constantly changing. The U.S. has a $50 billion trade deficit with Canada. Then it's $100 billion. Then it's $200 billion. Then it's $250 billion. So it's hard to predict what's going to happen. What I would say is that we do have a playbook from COVID and from the aftermath of COVID, how to deal with uncertain supply chains and disruptions that happen. And the best thing to do is start prioritizing now what is important, what is it that you can't do without, and what are your options with where to buy it. Buying Canadian is patriotic, but if it's going to mean that you're paying a higher price than you otherwise would, that might not necessarily be the best move. If something's going to be subject to a tariff and something isn't, maybe go for the thing that isn't subject to a tariff. Maybe look for other goods that you wouldn't have necessarily considered, but maybe now is the time to try those goods as substitutes for things you otherwise would have done under normal circumstances. And then stuff that's not as important or not as necessary or doesn't have as high a priority on your budget, maybe you suspend those until we get a better feel for, are these tariffs actually going to come into play? Are there going to be retaliatory tariffs? And of course, in Canada, we have our own uncertainty where we have a federal election that's coming up, where we know who the leader of two of the parties are, but we still don't know who the leader of the third party is going to be. And that's yet to be determined and what their policy positions are going to be.
All right, Moshe, thank you very much.
Anytime.
That is Moshe Lander, who's a senior lecturer in the Department of Economics at Concordia University. Well, we've got a couple of minutes before we turn to Heather Wells with headlines and what's making news this Thursday morning in Manitoba. But I want to share some comments that you've been sharing with us on my Facebook page, which during the show acts as a show page. So You can weigh in there. Marcy Marcusa with a K. We asked, how do you hope Manitoba deals with proposed U.S. tariffs to keep our economy strong? Which is, of course, why we're live at Peerless this morning. We're going to explore this with exporters and other businesses, and the Premier later, by the way, on the show live. But here's what you've been sharing. Jerry Lee McKay says any efforts toward decreasing dependence on the USA would be wise, working toward elimination of interprovincial trade barriers, diversifying international trade, and pushing for a Trans-Canada pipeline will be good for the long term. Jonathan Lipson says sell whatever goods we normally do, buy whatever goods we need elsewhere at comparable pre-tariff costs as much as we can, and make travel arrangements elsewhere. A lot of you have been writing in saying you're booking different travel and you're not going south. Deborah Bosch is pretty blunt. She says shop Canadian and boycott American travel in Canada. It's such a beautiful country with much more to offer than the U.S. We all need to work together and see that we can make a difference. And then finally, comment here from Percy Phillips writing in. Manitoba is an exporting province. 4 million pounds of French fries a day, 50 weeks of the year, nettable beans, oats, field pea plant, the largest in the Western world in Manitoba. Also, canola, grains, hemp, bus windows, RVs, and then some significant mining products as well. And that is, in fact, the list. We need to be in step with a coordinated national effort, Percy writes, to get a 10% tariff, something that can be managed, and get away from this 25% that Percy says would be crippling to our economy. So this is listeners writing in about where we go next from all of this, and how specifically we asked, you hope Manitoba deals with proposed U.S. tariffs to keep our economy strong. The Premier is live on our show after 8, so we're of course going to ask him what plans he's making to do just that, as we're live from Peerless Garments this morning on Notre Dame. Stay tuned. What a community studio this is with all the sewing machines buzzing around us here. All right, let's get to Heather Wells now. She's back at 541 Portage Ave with our headlines.
Good morning. Well, a candidate to be the next leader of Manitoba's PC says there is porn in schools. Wally Dowdrich says there are school libraries with books describing bestiality and incest. He brought it up at a leadership debate in Brandon last night. And a Winnipeg psychologist is hearing from some travelers anxious after Monday's crash of that Delta plane in Toronto. 21 people were injured when the plane from Minneapolis crashed and flipped while landing. It was the fourth major aviation incident in North America in less than a month. We're going to hear from the psychologist who says it's normal to have concerns about air travel, especially in a time of heightened overall anxiety in the world. I'll be back with more Manitoba news coming up at 7:30.
Well, we had a good drive over here, clear, cold. So if you have something to report in the commute, 788-3093, please update us. It's going to be sunny today, a high -15, and with the wind chill, it'll feel more like -32. But guess what, folks? I ripped up that extreme cold warning today because they finally ended it. All of this is going to break tomorrow. It's going to look a lot better. We're 1 minute to 7 o'clock. In the next hour of Information Radio, we're going to hear how Manitoba's manufacturing industry is bracing for potential tariffs, and how a locally based maker of garbage mitts, you know, those leather gloves, is navigating the heightened demand for Canadian-made goods. So we hear what he's been hearing from customers. In addition, for Peerless Garments, where we are today, a multi-million-dollar contract with the United States, a company there, is on the line if tariffs come into effect. The owner will talk about what happens if the contract goes away. And we also are going to dip into that hockey game as Canada faces against the U.S. in the Four Nations final tonight. We actually are going to hear from Manitoba hockey fans about what the win would mean to you. Stay tuned.
Today.
Look at North America, you look at Canada, the North, the Arctic, it's a vast, vast area.
U.S. President Donald Trump has his eye on the Arctic. We will hear from the three northern premiers about how they are reasserting Canadian sovereignty and why the Arctic is not for sale. Premiers of Yukon, Nunavut, and the Northwest Territories coming up on The Current.
The Current with Matt Galloway. This morning at 8:37, 9:07 in Newfoundland, and on the CBC Listen app.
This is World Report. Good morning, I'm Martina Fitzgerald. Relations between the United States and Ukraine are taking a nasty turn. The U.S. National Security Advisor, Mike Waltz, says Ukraine needs to stop bad-mouthing his country. Last night, President Donald Trump again accused Ukraine's president of skipping elections. It's a talking point that is often trotted out by the Kremlin and is not exactly true. Anna Cunningham has more on this growing rift.
a dictator without elections.
Speaking at a Saudi-backed event in Miami, U.S. President Donald Trump repeated his claims.
Zelensky better move fast or he's not going to have a country left. Got to move fast.
This battle of words has seen the U.S.-Ukraine relationship crumble rapidly, with Trump first claiming Ukraine initiated the war, then Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky saying Trump was living in a Russian disinformation bubble. Zelensky was elected in 2019. His term in office was due to end in May 2024, but it was extended because Ukraine is in a state of martial law. Zelensky has promised to hold elections as soon as the war is over. Overnight, Ukraine's military says Russia launched 161 drones and some 14 missiles. The country's energy minister says gas facilities were targeted. Today, there will be a delicate diplomatic performance as Zelensky sits down with Keith Kellogg, the US envoy to Kyiv. Last night, British Prime Minister Keir Starmer phoned Zelensky to reassure him he was a democratically elected leader who can count on Britain's backing. He says he'll deliver Europe's message to Trump next week at the White House. Anna Cunningham, CBC News, London.
Hamas says it's ready to release all remaining hostages at the same time if Israel will commit to a second phase of the ceasefire agreement. The Palestinian militant group made the announcement this morning just before handing over the bodies of 4 hostages, including children. The CBC's Sasha Petrusik brings us the latest from Jerusalem.
The music may have been upbeat in Khan Yunis this morning, but everything else was somber. Under cold rain, 4 black coffins carried by Hamas fighters, 2 of the caskets bearing the Bibas children, 4-year-old Ariel and his 9-month-old brother. They were kidnapped along with their mother, Shiri. She was in a 3rd coffin, a neighbor from their kibbutz in a 4th. Hamas says they died in an airstrike in southern Gaza. The Israeli army killed them, says Mujahideen, a Hamas fighter. Others in the crowd watching mourn Palestinian children who also died. Right until this week, many in Israel hoped the Bibas children had survived, says family friend Yiftach Cohen.
Shiri and the kids became a symbol. I still hope that they will be alive.
A symbol of hope for many in Israel, not knowing how many of the remaining 69 hostages survived 16 months in captivity. A shocking day, a day of grief, says Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu. Many here blame him for dragging out ceasefire negotiations and the hostage releases. But today, as some gathered in Hostage Square and others lined the route home for the coffins, the focus was on the youngest ones lost. Sasha Petrusik, CBC News, Jerusalem.
Hundreds of supporters of South Korea's president rally outside the country's constitutional court. That's where Yoon Suk-yeol is today, pleading to preserve his presidency. Yoon's impeachment trial is in its final phase. It will determine whether to permanently remove him from office or reinstate him. Yoon briefly imposed martial law in the country last December. The move caused political turmoil in South Korea. Yoon is also facing criminal rebellion charges related to his declaration of martial law. That case is also being heard in a Seoul court today. An alleged ISIS supporter is set to appear in a Montreal court. He's accused of plotting to kill Jews in New York. This morning, he faces an extradition hearing and, if convicted, up to 20 years in prison. Thomas Dagla reports.
RCMP arrested Mohammed Shahzeb Khan near the U.S. border in Quebec in September. Today, he's appearing before a judge in Montreal who will consider whether the 20-year-old should be extradited to the U.S. to face a terrorism charge. Born in Pakistan, Khan came to Ontario on a student visa in 2023 and was soon on the FBI's radar. U.S. prosecutors say he planned an ISIS-inspired mass shooting at a Jewish center in Brooklyn and wanted to carry out the plot this past October 7th. Extradition expert Robert Curry at Nova Scotia's Dalhousie University expects at today's hearing the Crown will give evidence that answers two questions.
One, is this indeed the right person who is being sought? And second, has the U.S. presented evidence that appears to suggest that he committed the crime?
Khan's lawyer, Gaetan Bourassa, previously suggested investigators lured his client into all of it.
My impression that it was a victim of entrapment by police officers in the States.
A CBC News investigation found Khan was in the process of claiming asylum in Canada, while the FBI alleges he was seeking others to join a murderous plot. Thomas Daigle, CBC News, Toronto.
Canada's ambassador to the United States is hinting she believes Canada may be able to avoid broad U.S. tariffs. Kirsten Hillman says advisors to the president are pleased with Canada's progress on illegal migration and fentanyl trafficking.
I'm getting signals that the work that we are doing and the results that we are achieving is well received. And there's a recognition that Canada has made important steps and that we are doing good work.
Hillman told the CBC's Power and Politics it seems U.S. President Donald Trump is threatening different tariffs for different reasons. The broad 25% tariffs on all Canadian goods, she says, appear to be a negotiating tactic, but the others on steel and aluminum are being used as a tool to protect domestic industries. Today, Prime Minister Justin Trudeau will discuss the tariff threat in a virtual meeting with the country's premiers. Canadians are about to get their first look at a plan to modernize the government's mandate for CBC Radio-Canada. The mandate has not been reviewed since 1991. Since then, the media landscape has changed radically, and updating it is one of the assigned duties for Pascale St-Onge as Heritage Minister. She will unveil her vision to the public in 2.5 hours. One key proposal is to create a law ensuring that Radio-Canada's French services are independent of the CBC. The Mayor of Montreal is asking for patience as snow clearing operations continue. Valerie Plante says the city has cleared nearly 20% of the snow so far and can't say when the job will be done. As Kwabina Oduro reports, it's posing a challenge for seniors and people with limited mobility.
It makes me hibernate like a bear. I'm sort of stuck in my house.
Marjorie Ono says she stopped going out in the winter because her manual wheelchair keeps getting stuck in the snow. The recent pair of snowstorms have caused major concerns for many people trying to get around. But for those with reduced mobility, like Ono's, the obstacles are much greater.
If I have to go, like if there's like an emergency or something that's really important, I really have to plan it to make sure that, everything is shoveled so that I can get out with my car. But if I want to go somewhere, it has to be free of obstacles on the place that I'm going.
Snow clearing is an issue for multiple cities in Canada. Toronto city officials say it could take up to 3 weeks to clear the snow. That's because city crews can only push the snow so far before it has to be loaded into trucks and transported to the city's designated storage sites. The lack of snow clearing in Montreal has forced the New Hope Senior Citizen Centre to shut down all its services and activities. Executive Director Evita Karasak says it's impossible for staff and clients to access the building.
Anytime there's a situation like this, it's the same as in COVID. You just worry about everybody. One of our clients hasn't had heat in her house for 2 days. It's devastating to hear those stories of people suffering and not being able to directly help them.
Ono says until the streets are completely cleared, she will have to rely on family members to bring her the essentials and keep her company. Kwabina Oduro, CBC News, Montreal.
And that is the latest from World Report. 10 minutes is all it takes to get the news you need from CBC. Why not make it a habit? Follow World Report today and every day, wherever you get your podcasts. I'm Martina Fitzgerald.
I think the tariffs can affect the business in a couple of different ways. As our products become more expensive, certainly we will sell less in the United States and make up for it by selling more in other areas.
It's pretty hard to go to war with somebody one day and then suddenly be their favored trading partner the next. So yeah, I think this will have some lasting effects.
Canada, in my opinion, should just cut off the gas, cut off the water, cut off the electricity, because we supply almost all their northern states. And I think if we did a smart move like this, it might wake Trump up a little bit.
Those are some of the voices of people we've heard weighing in on the threat of tariffs from the U.S. that could come into play in 12 days from now. Good morning, everyone. We have a special edition of Information Radio. I'm Marcy Marcusa. We're live on the factory floor at Peerless Garments on Notre Dame. This hour, we're going to explore what's at stake. So each and every day, 70,000 people go to work in the manufacturing industry in this province. They represent some 1,400 companies. We're going to hear a little bit more about the specific details about some companies that have concerns if these tariffs go into play. So, for example, here at Peerless Garments, if tariffs happen, Peerless could lose a multi-million-dollar contract. We are surrounded by sewing stations. That means that some of these may sit empty. There are people's jobs at stake here, potentially, in Manitoba overall. So we have to talk about what we need to do to strengthen the economy. What can we do in the face of all of this? Stay tuned for a special broadcast here as we continue this hour. Also, I should mention the Premier of Manitoba will be on the floor here at Peerless with us after 8. Right now, though, 7:12, and Heather Wells joins us. She's back at CBC's headquarters at 541 Portage Avenue. Hi, Heather.
Hi, good morning. Well, a candidate to be the next leader of Manitoba's PCs says there is porn in Manitoba schools. Wally Dowdrich says there are school libraries with books describing porn. He brought it up at a leadership debate in Brandon last night. We'll hear more about that. And some students at the University of Manitoba say they would like to see more Indigenous representation in faculty and in content taught in their courses. Those stories and more in our next local news coming up at 7:30.
All right. Thank you, Heather.
You're welcome.
Let's have a look at this forecast. Abby Adiemi, what's the day going to bring for Winnipeg?
Well, that extreme cold warning has ended for most of southern Manitoba, from Winnipeg all the way down to the U.S. border. However, for the Westman and Parkland region, talking about Dauphin and Brandon, it just returned because of that wind chill values that is in the range of minus 40 and minus 41 in both areas. However, once we get into the day, temperatures will begin to improve for that part of the province. Right now, minus 22 and clear in the city, plenty of sunshine in the forecast. We do see a high of minus 15 today. However, the wind chill feels like minus 32 this morning, so brace for that.
All right, thanks a lot, Abby.
Thank you.
So that's Abby Adiemi. Corey Funk's actually here on the factory floor with me with a quick look at traffic, and then we're going to talk about what you've been talking to some of the workers. So.
Yeah, really quiet commute overall so far. Haven't heard of any major issues, but if you do see something going on, if you're walking, biking, driving, give me a call. That number, 204-788-3093.
Now, you can hear around me. You can hear the sewing machines around me and some of the things that are, machines punching rivets into fabric, for example, and some of the thick fabrics here at Peerless Garments, because this place manufactures has some military grade wear. We were looking at some of the products in the last hour. There's 87 employees overall that work here, but you were talking to at least a couple of them, I think. Corey.
Yeah, I just happened to talk to the two employees that have been here the longest. Oh, so Olga, they've both been here. They're tied. 50 years they've been here. They both started when they were 15 years old. There's Olga, but there's Altino. I chatted with Altino. He now supervises the cutting room there. He was cutting a giant piece of camouflage fabric, and I asked him, are you worried about the tariffs? And he said, sure, like he's worried about what that could mean for this place. He doesn't know what it could mean for jobs. Like it's everything. There's a lot of uncertainty right now, but he's also just worried about his family too. He has a daughter that works in construction, right? What does that mean for them? So there's just a lot of ripple effects that I think a lot of people are feeling right now for themselves and their families as well.
People are writing in. You're writing in to us this morning. Also, we asked, how do you hope Manitoba deals with proposed U.S. tariffs to keep our economy strong? And just a quick comment here. This one came in from Marcia Allen, who writes, I hope Manitoba keeps up the support for good and for all of the people who have secondary homes in the USA. Come back and support our economy in Canada. We need your support. Of course, it's your choice, she writes, but you can clearly see what the close allyship is looking like right now. So a lot of you writing in today, but next on the show, we're about to explore just how much we do manufacture in this province, and we're going to hear what some of the companies have been sharing with each other. Stay tuned. A special edition of Information Radio. So live with me here is my next guest, and we also have another guest joining us by phone this morning. So let's look at the stats. As I mentioned, about 70,000 people every day work in manufacturing in this province. Some 1,400 companies are represented. A lot of the things we export out of Manitoba go directly to the United States. The number I have is about 80%. So that goes without saying that these potential tariffs could have a huge impact on our economy. On the flip side, though, the push to buy Canadian has not been stronger. Business owners like Howard Raber are taking notice. He's the owner of Raber Gloves, which makes the famous garbage mitts, among other things, here in Winnipeg. Corey's got them. Here they are. Oh, you got to give me the other one so I can clap. Every Winnipegger, I think, knows the sound of garbage mitts. These are Corey's. They are from Raber, by the way. You know when you slap that leather, right? You put them on, right? They're the perfect hockey mitts.
I was going to say sounds like corner hockey to me, yeah.
Here, Corey, throwing Corey back his Raber gloves. That voice you heard is Terry Shaw. He's with us on the factory floor here at Peerless. He's the regional vice president for Prairie Provinces with the Canadian Manufacturers and Exporters. Officially, hello.
Good morning.
Thanks for being here. Howard Raber is actually on the phone with us this morning to talk about his business. Good morning, Howard.
Good morning. Good morning.
So your factory actually is just, we're on the factory floor at Peerless, but you're close by here in Winnipeg, right?
A stone's throw away.
Yep. So where are you located?
At 560 McDermott Avenue.
How long you been in business? How many employees? And tell me about your Canadian pride.
Well, we've been in business since 1941. We employ anywhere between 40 and 45 currently. And we have been and always have been Canadian-made.
What are the challenges for your products? Because you said that, I mean, the vast majority of what you do to put your gloves together is Canadian, but there's certain things that there's realities for companies here. Like, there's things you can't find here.
Yeah, I mean, for us, it's we've developed a loyal following over the years, and we're noticing now more than ever that the, let alone based in Canada, but the Made in Canada moniker is carrying a lot more weight and is gaining momentum.
So what are people calling and asking you about it? I understand that since the threat of tariffs was announced, people are actually, calling them. Are they calling to make sure you're Canadian?
Well, not directly related to the recent issues with regarding tariffs. We have had recent phone calls, or I have personally, where somebody had received a pair of our mittens for a present, and the sew-in label says made in Winnipeg, Manitoba, Canada, and they just wanted to clarify that it was in fact made in Canada, otherwise that they would return them to the store. But that's what we're hearing, where a lot of people are saying, we appreciate the value, we appreciate you being made in Canada, and we're going to support you.
How your business, Howard, does not export to the U.S., why not?
A, we haven't found the proper vendor to carry our basic mitts and gloves. And I have, I do well enough in Canada alone that I didn't have to seek extra business in the United States.
Got it. Does some of your thread come from the States? Like, will you be in trouble with any of the input costs of what it takes to make your products?
The weakening Canadian dollar is affecting our pricing currently because our leather, our lining, the majority of the components that goes into our products is bought in U.S. dollars. And for this year alone, it's reflected a cost increase of anywhere between 8 and 10%. But again, thanks to the following and people wanting to buy made in Canada, I haven't seen any negative effects from the pricing.
So, we're going to talk to the Premier in an hour, and part of what we'll talk about is finding other markets. I think the average person listening, Howard, might not understand how challenging that is to just try to find another market other than the U.S. How concerned are you about that?
I guess in a way, not really. After being around for as long as we have, we've developed a very loyal customer base. And for us, if we get the colder the weather, and the more repeat business we get, the better. But we haven't looked for anything outside because we can only make and produce in a year what we make and produce in a year.
And what do you make and produce in a year? What are your sales like? Or if you want to, do it by the quantity of mitts and gloves. Either way, how do you quantify what you do?
To do that, people have asked me how many do you prepare in a year. There's no way that I can tell you. but my sales fluctuate between $3 and $3.5 million a year.
Yeah. The dollar, then, that's the biggest thing that you're watching, obviously. I guess just lastly, the Premier's on in an hour. As a business owner here, what do you need from the provincial government?
Actually, not much. I mean, just to support Canadian-made, to give when tenders come out. It's not always necessarily priced because we are now supporting the rest between around 40 families to show more leeway towards dealing with Canadian companies.
All right, Howard. Well, you're the only man who's been happy about the deep freeze.
Yeah, it's music to my ears when I hear it. It's music to my ears.
Glad you could join us. I know you'd planned to be here live, and it just didn't work, so we're grateful that we had you on for the conversation. Thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you.
That's Howard Raber, owns Raber Gloves. So Terry Shaw's been standing by patiently here. I don't think a lot of Manitobans might understand. Like we say, I have those numbers right. 70,000 people employed in manufacturing, 1,400 companies. Yep. What are you hearing from businesses right now about their biggest concerns?
Yeah, much unlike Howard, so I'm glad to hear Howard's going to be okay. A lot of uncertainty, and the uncertainty is getting people to sit on their hands. They're stopping investment, they're stopping hiring, they're postponing or maybe canceling planned expansions, things like that, and that's in advance of the tariffs. If the tariffs are implemented, we did a national survey, would have been about a month ago now. Half of people said that they will lay off workers. Half of Canadian manufacturers said that they will look at shifting some production to the United States, and just under half, 46% of them, said that they will cancel some planned investments. So expansions, hiring, new technologies, it just all stops. So pretty dramatic numbers if the tariffs come in.
How worried should we be in Manitoba? We have some big companies here that actually have manufacturing on both sides of the border. Mm-hmm. How worried should we be that if this all comes to fruition, they'll say, well, we're going to close the Canadian manufacturing in Manitoba because, frankly, the dollar is a challenge and we make more money in the States, and that's just our bottom line. And what, are we worried about losing people?
We're already seeing a bit of leakage. I think the reality is, and the stat I like to put out is 60% of what we ship to the United States is an intermediate input. It's something that U.S. manufacturers use to create their finished good. Over half of what we bring into Canada from U.S. exports are intermediate inputs. So the reason you see companies on both sides of the border is because it makes sense, right? Like, we don't compete as economies, Canada and the U.S. We collaborate. We actually build things together, have for many, many decades, and will continue to.
I saw you sort of acknowledging, at least when I was talking about the challenge of the statement that we'll just find new markets.
Yeah, it's not that simple. So a couple of things. The U.S. is a huge economy. We're never going to not do business with the United States. Proximity. You can drive 90 minutes out and you're in the United States, right? And so even if you can find new customers, what are the logistics? What are the supply chain realities? What are the costing realities? What does that do to your production timelines if I can't make it today, ship it down, and sell it tomorrow, but I got to get it to a port, I got to get it to a train, I got to get it overseas, etc. So we do have members looking to diversify markets. But one of the things Howard said was local procurement. Longer term, we would love to see some government procurement reform around that buy local. Spence Brothers Pizza, Bothwell Cheese. What we're seeing at the consumer level is fantastic. We need to see it at the larger industrial level. What are we doing to support fire trucks being made locally? What are we doing to support specialized vehicles and other kind of like products here through government procurement reforms?
So the government is talking about, has floated at least, Wab Canoe, the Premier, who will be here in an hour, talked about potential for tax deferral.
Absolutely.
Is that, and then we have other provinces actually that are making plans to have contingency funds and such just in case. What would you like to see from the province?
Short term, anything that we can do to keep dollars in the pockets of manufacturers so they can keep paying workers to come into work every day, right? The reality of that is that depends on your U.S. Trade exposure, right? Like, we've got some companies that have 80, 85, 90% U.S. trade exposure. You can defer taxes. You can put in work share programs, things like that. but that's not going to keep their employees there. And so we need some unique supports depending on the situation and the unique corporate footprint.
I just want to ask you this, because I just want to make mention here. Like, I mean, when you think of big manufacturers in Manitoba, and I'm not going to name all of them, of course, but I mean, Peerless and New Flyer, Western Glove, Silver Jeans, Mondetta, Richardson, Boeing, Maple Leaf, the sheet metal in Gerdau, in steel, rather, in Selkirk, Price Industries. We did call a lot of manufacturers. Many of them returned our calls and spoke with us, but didn't actually want to. They're waiting.
Yep.
They didn't want to go on the air. They're kind of waiting. I'm wondering if you're sensing a nervousness, and maybe how this compares to last time Trump put tariffs our way.
Yeah, I wasn't in the role last time, but I definitely sense a dramatic difference, right? Like the tariffs are expanded. He's emboldened in some of the things he's saying, and things are changing, not daily anymore, but very regularly, right? And so that uncertainty is really driving people to not only sit in their hands in terms of investments and expansion plans, but just what do they communicate to their staff? What do they communicate to their customers, to their suppliers? So that uncertainty really has people, I think, kind of hunkering down a bit. Yeah.
Thank you, Terry. We've got to talk about a hockey game coming up next, but appreciate having you here.
Let's go. Thank you.
That is Terry Shaw. Us live on the factory floor at Peerless Garments, Regional Vice President for Prairie Provinces with the Canadian Manufacturers and Exporters. So Scott Reger is here at 7:26 to talk about that game, Canada, U.S., to prove who's best at hockey. What are you expecting in this final of the Four Nations face-off?
Well, Marcy, more of the same. When it comes to what we saw when these nations squared off last Saturday night, in that game, Montreal fans booed the Star-Spangled Banner, showing contempt for a country whose leader had imposed punishing trade tariffs. Well, tonight in Boston, expect "O Canada" to be jeered in response. The question is, will we see a slew of fights break out after the anthems like we did in the last game? We've already heard plenty of fighting words. Asked about the U.S. team's online chat group where Matthew Tkachuk encouraged teammates to brawl to stir up the Montreal fans, Canadian forward Brandon Hagel was critical, saying his team was not so attention-seeking. Well, yesterday, Tkachuk continued the war of words.
Well, I mean, maybe their team doesn't like each other then if they don't have group chats, but, I think that that's just a player, enjoying his opportunities. So I think that our team does not care about anything that they say, and there's been a lot of chatter and talk from individuals, but we have millions of people that are watching us and supporting us around this country, and we're very prideful in playing for them.
Nothing would bring more pride, of course, than simply winning the game tonight and having bragging rights heading into next year's Olympics. Who comes out on top? Well, it's a coin flip for many, given how evenly matched the Canadian and American teams are. The surest thing, Marcy, is that it's going to be a close game, regardless of who prevails.
Who do you think could be the players that are the difference makers?
Well, tough to look beyond the goalies in that regard. The U.S. has the world's best in the Jets' Connor Hellebuck, while Canada has Jordan Binnington, who might not be in the world's top 10 at the moment. That said, Binnington, when he gets hot, can be close to unbeatable. We saw that in the Stanley Cup final in the decisive game a few years back when Binnington helped the Blues upset the Bruins in the same building he's going to be playing in tonight in Boston. Then you have Connor McDavid, widely regarded as the best player in the sport. Tonight, Marcy's an opportunity for him to prove it. McDavid, remember, was not great in Game 7 of last season's Stanley Cup final. He needs to be better tonight. And finally, there's Cale Makar, who was injured and unavailable last Saturday. Makar, arguably the best defender on the planet, will play tonight. And I do wonder if he'll be feeling extra patriotic given Makar's Ukrainian heritage and Donald Trump's comments yesterday about who started the war with with Russia. That is the backdrop with puck drop at 7 o'clock Central Time.
And I'm sorry, I just got to say, not Donald Trump's comment, Donald Trump's lie about who started the war with Russia. That's straight, factually misinformation. Yep. Let's finish with curling, where the playoff picture is becoming clear at the Tournament of Hearts.
It is. Rachel Homan, still undefeated. She's going through in Group A. Of course, lots of interest in Manitoba in the skips from the province. Carrie Anerson, she beat Nova Scotia yesterday. She sits at 4-2. Caitlin Laws beat the Northwest Territories. Her rank is at 4-3. They're both in playoff contention, heading into play today in Pool B.
All right. Thanks a lot, Scott. Appreciate it.
Enjoy the game.
Yeah, will do. I'll be watching like so many. Coming up, speaking of watching that game, should politics be a factor when it comes to hockey? CBC's Jim Agapito spoke to some Winnipeg hockey fans ahead of tonight's game. We'll hear that after your CBC Winnipeg News.
This is CBC News. Good morning. I'm Heather Wells in Winnipeg. At 7:30, it is minus 22. Hopefully this is the last time I have to say this in a while. An extreme cold warning covering most of southern Manitoba. We do see a warm up, though, starting this weekend. But for today, sunny in Winnipeg, a high of minus 15 with a risk of frostbite. One of the candidates seeking to be leader of Manitoba's Progressive Conservatives is worried about the books in this province's schools. Wally Dowdrich says some libraries have pornographic books describing bestiality and incest. He brought it up at a leadership debate last night in Brandon. Dowdrich did not say where these books are located. He accused his only opponent in the leadership race, Abi Khan, of failing to remove the books when he was a government minister. Khan says that is false. He adds, as a minister, he recommended books about sensitive topics be put into age-appropriate areas of school libraries. But he says PCs ran out of time to implement those rules.
We had numerous conversations when I was a minister with libraries and discussion on age-appropriate material and how to handle that and where that should be placed. And then the election was called and we moved on forward from there.
Khan says it is up to municipalities or school divisions to decide which books belong in their libraries. Some students at the University of Manitoba say they would like to see more Indigenous representation in faculty and in content taught in their courses. Noah Crossman is co-president of the Métis University Students Association. He studies psychology at the U of M. Crossman wants to see two different ways of learning woven together in his studies at the university.
But it's definitely tough, and it's because, from a broad perspective, science and the university in general is very colonial, and just inherently. And so it's hard to blend those two knowledge systems for sure.
The university introduced an Indigenous course requirement for the Faculty of Arts in 2021. The school says sciences are heading in that direction, and some programs have the requirement in admissions criteria. A Brandon man has been sentenced to 9 months in custody in an intimate images case. The man uploaded sexually explicit videos of his then pregnant ex-girlfriend to a popular porn website. He did so without her consent, according to a recent decision filed in a provincial court. The decision says the man posted multiple videos to his Pornhub account. He restricted views to the account's 18 friends and 7 subscribers and texted his ex a link to one of the videos. Neither the man nor the woman were named in this decision. In a victim impact statement, the woman says she felt profound devastation knowing such intensely intimate videos had been posted online. Canada's ambassador to the United States, Kirsten Hillman, says it is possible Canada might be in a position to avoid widespread U.S. tariffs.
I'm getting signals that the work that we are doing and the results that we are achieving is well received. And there's a recognition that Canada has made important steps and that we are doing good work.
Appearing on CBC's Power and Politics, Hillman says it appears the Trump administration is threatening different tariffs for different reasons. She says the broad 25% tariffs on all Canadian goods appears to be a general negotiating tactic, but the others on steel and aluminum are being used as a tool to protect American industry. Relations between the United States and Ukraine are taking a nasty turn, and the U.S. National Security Advisor Mike Waltz says Ukraine needs to stop bad-mouthing his country. Last night, President Donald Trump again accused Ukraine's president of skipping elections. A grim ceremony this morning in Gaza. Music playing while a large crowd of Palestinian spectators cheers. The Palestinian militant group Hamas handed over the remains of 4 Israeli hostages who died in captivity. They are said to include an 84-year-old peace activist, a mother, her baby, and her second son who was kidnapped when he was just 4 years old. The bodies of the Israeli hostages were placed in black coffins on a stage before being handed over to the Red Cross. You can hear more national and international news coming up on World Report at 8. A clinical psychologist says it's normal for people to have concerns about flying in the wake of Monday's plane crash in Toronto. 21 people were hurt when the jet from Minneapolis crashed and flipped while landing. It was the fourth major aviation incident in North America in less than a month. Dr. Rahman Abdulrahman says the fears have come up in therapy.
When we start to witness things that are very traumatic, and we're witnessing other things in the world that are traumatic, our anxiety is going to be heightened, and we're more likely to focus in and have a selective attention towards that particular thing. And our job ultimately is start to challenge those points of views, with logic and rationale.
Aviation expert Scott Hamilton calls the string of crashes an unfortunate coincidence in timing. You can find more Manitoba news updated throughout the day. All you have to do is head to cbc.ca/Manitoba.
All right, thanks very much, Heather Wells. I'm Marcy Marcusa, and we are live on location this morning at Peerless Garments on Notre Dame. Abby, though, is back with a little bit of good news on the horizon for our regional forecast.
Yeah, plenty of sunshine in the forecast for most of the southern regions, and some regions still seeing that extreme cold. Looking at Brandon and the Dauphin region, still seeing wind chills in the range of -40 and -41. However, the rest of the south for Winnipeg all the way down to the U.S. border, that extreme cold warning has ended. We also warm up later as we get into the weekend. For Winnipeg at this time, -23, we're seeing clear conditions, plenty of sunshine on the way. It will feel like -32 this morning, though we warm up to -15 later today. Similar conditions we're seeing in Morden, Winkler, Morris, all the way down to Altona. Sunshine will dominate the day. We're seeing temperatures around -25 at this time. Heading west to Brandon, -33, we're seeing extreme cold warning remains in effect for Brandon. Expect sunshine today. The wind chill makes it feel like -40 this morning. You do warm up though. And then for Dauphin and the Parkland region, we're looking at temperatures around -25. Clear conditions you're seeing. It's still cold there. Sunny skies will dominate the day. You see highs around -14. Gimli, good morning. You're sitting at -30 at this time. Clear conditions you have for the Interlake region today. Expect plenty of sunshine. Highs will be around -15. The Power Flame Flown and surrounding area, we're looking at temperatures around -35. Mainly sunny today with increasing clouds this afternoon. Wind chills will make it feel like -38 this morning. For Thompson, it's -28 and clear. A bright day also ahead for folks there with some winds increasing later in the day. We'll see highs around -14. With the wind chill, there's a risk of frostbite. And further north in Churchill, -16 and cloudy. Skies will be clear, but the wind will make it. The wind chill makes it feel like -32 this morning. So it's still frigid across the province, but sunshine will definitely dominate most of the regions, and extreme cold warning still in effect for the Westman and the Parkland regions.
All right, thanks a lot, Abby.
Thank you.
Corey Funk is live here on the factory floor with us at Peerless. What's up in the commute?
Very quiet commute overall so far. Enjoyed those last couple days without big potholes, as that temperature is set to be above zero in the next week or so. But if you do see something going on, if you're walking, biking, driving, you see something, give me a call on that CBC commuter line, and I'll let folks know what you're seeing out there. That number to call, 204-788-3093.
All right, thanks, Corey.
Thank you.
I just want to reset where we are this morning. So I'm in the middle of the factory floor at Peerless Garments on Notre Dame. This is a really historic company. The owner here's owned it for 55 years, but the history goes even beyond that. And just around me, there's different sewing stations, and I was just talking to some of the workers putting in zippers on some of the final jackets here. And there's just walls of spools of thread and people busy at work. Overall, as I mentioned, this company employs 87 people. It also has some big contracts, one of them with the United States in particular, that the owner is worried about. So we're going to hear more about that when he joins us here in this half hour of the program. But big thanks to everybody here for letting us be right in the middle of your workspace this morning as we explore the concerns about these potential tariffs. All right, next on the program, let's keep talking about the Canada-U.S. relationship, but through hockey. It's a pretty big day if you're a hockey fan. Canada-U.S. Four Nations hockey final goes tonight. In the States this time. It's in Boston. Now, a victory over Finland on Monday ensured Canada a rematch against the Americans. Canada's looking for redemption, though. We lost to the U.S. last week by a score of 3-1, came out pretty strong, and then just couldn't get it done in the end. And with the current political situation between both nations, we're asking the question, does this game have more weight than just being a good old hockey game? We sent CBC's Jim Agapito to find out.
My name is Kenny Quinn. Of course, I will be watching. And Canada's winning. Canada's winning.
Canada's winning? Why do you say that?
I say that because Austin Matthews is a bum. He has scoreless, I think, about 7-8 games. Bum. Sidney Crosby, monster. He's old, still got it. Mitch Marner, still got it.
Hi, my name's Stephen Taylor.
Will you be watching the Canada versus U.S. Four Nations game tomorrow?
Yeah, 100% I'll be watching the game tomorrow.
And why?
Well, I'm a big hockey fan, and there's no bigger game than this in the past. Was it 6-9 years? We haven't had a best-on-best tournament, nation versus nation, so I'm super excited.
Hi, my name is Joanna Williams.
Will you be watching the Canada versus U.S. hockey game tomorrow?
Yes.
And why will you be watching?
Well, because I'm American and Canadian, so I don't know, maybe I'll see who wins, so.
Considering what's happening between both of our countries, the political climate, how do you feel about that being both, Canadian and American?
I think Trump is really trying to make, Canada 51st state, and I wouldn't be opposed to it, but I know a lot of Americans, my Canadian side is opposed to it.
Joe, you did not just say that. Joe!
No, my American side is not opposed to it, but my Canadian side is.
So how do you feel about this face-off considering the current political climate?
To me it's twofold. I would love to see politics removed completely from all sports. I don't like having anthems in sports. I think it's a waste of time. They're already politicizing things. But as long as they're going to do that, what better chance for Canadians to kind of push back on the American rhetoric that we're being bombarded with the past month? It's never good when someone talks about you as if you're less than, so this is our chance to prove that we are not what people think that we are.
Considering the political climate, I think that we should beat the hell out of the States. Keep booing their anthem, puck drop, I want 10 fights.
My name is François Dufour. I think it's going to be more than just a game. It's going to be like somewhat of a political statement. Usually sports and politics don't mix too well, but I think it's going to go pretty good for that game. I think.
Do you think we should leave politics out of sports? Can we just enjoy the game for what it is? Is that possible?
No, I think in this case, I think it was important for Canadians to make a statement, especially that is seen worldwide. And I think that I don't mind the way the crowd reacted the first couple games. So I don't know. I think it's good to make a statement when you need to, and if it means to be heard, then yes, I think it's all right. I think it's all right to mix the two.
I think sports is really important in a country and a nation's building, I guess. And I think sports shows a lot of the personality and, characteristics of a country.
There is no way to keep politics out of your sport because sport is a representative of your state or your city or your country. It's Canada versus the U.S. right now. You see politics in it because there is political turmoil with the tariffs. You need to defend your nation, and sport is a way of expressing that.
What would a win mean for Canada?
I think a win morally would be a massive kind of upswing in how we feel about who we are as Canadians and really kind of bring that national identity back together. We care about hockey so much, and we, even if you're not a huge hockey fan, somehow you kind of get dragged into that kind of national identity part of it. So to me, I think a win against the Americans especially would be probably the biggest thing in years.
I think a win for Canada would be really crazy.
So what this really means for us is that we're weak, but we can express our views and our values through sport, which creates an uproar of Canadian patriotism. And I want this to be heard for the young people. We need to get out there and we need to vote and we need to defend our border and our nation.
What impact, if any, do you think this tournament has had on Canadian patriotism?
Oh, it definitely put us together. Especially when you look at, I'm from Quebec, and when you look at all the people I know from Quebec that are now just like so proud to be Canadian more than ever, I think it united the whole country. Especially the first few games were in Montreal. I think it just came at a perfect time. I think it unites us big time.
CBC's Jim Agapito out talking to Winnipeggers ahead of the Canada-U.S. Four Nations hockey final tonight. The game is in Boston. It starts at 7 o'clock Winnipeg time.
Being Black in Canada, a space for news, documentaries, arts, and more. Celebrating a uniquely Canadian perspective on Black issues with the cultural moments that matter to Black Canadians. Visit cbc.ca/Being Black in Canada.
In the world of marketing, there are things that are forbidden. It's illegal to use certain sounds. In some countries, there are rules around using national anthems in commercials. And forget about using Winnie the Pooh in China.
Oh, bother.
Forbidden branding on Under the Influence with Terry O'Reilly. Thursday morning at 11:30, 3:30 p.m. in Newfoundland. And on demand on CBC Listen.
The time right now is 7:45 a.m. I'm Marcy Marcusa. Thanks for joining us here on CBC 89.3 FM, 990 a.m. on the app or on YouTube. If you're watching us on YouTube, you get quite a sight this morning because we're surrounded by the workers right in the middle of the factory floor. We're live at Peerless Garments on Notre Dame. I just want to take a moment, though, to talk about how quickly things have been moving with this story, this threat of tariffs from the United States. So, I mean, really, we're February 20th. It felt like, just a month ago where we were at the beginning of the year was sort of like Donald Trump wasn't even inaugurated yet. And then he came in as U.S. president. And then it seemed every day
with somebody one day and then suddenly be their favored trading partner the next. So, yeah, I think this will have some lasting effects.
Manitoba produces over 8 million pigs a year, and 90% of that is export, either as pork products or live animals into the United States.
A big export in Manitoba is hydropower, electricity. Even 10% more might squeeze Manitoba Hydro's ability to secure large-scale, long-term power sales in the U.S. market that it's looking for.
I think the tariffs can affect the business in a couple of different ways. As our products become more expensive, certainly we will sell less in the United States and make up for it by selling more in other areas. Our profits may go down, and that will potentially reduce the amount of cash that we would be able to reinvest in the business in the coming year.
Let's worry less about what's going on south of the border and the potential threats and the Trump talk on a regular basis. Let's focus on what things that we can control.
So that's part of what we're doing this morning is trying to focus on what we know and understand about Manitoba and our exports and also our manufacturing businesses here. So those are some of the voices collaged from various CBC News stories, people we've talked to over the last month in our news. This morning, we're focusing on the makers. The makers in this province, those in the manufacturing sector, to talk about how proposed tariffs could cause some serious disruption in their businesses and where they do feel calmer, where they feel the economy is strong. So I continue to mention where we're live this morning. It's Peerless Garments on Notre Dame, surrounded by the sewing machines and such. But right now we do have the owner with us today, and that is Albert Alessi, owner and CEO of Peerless. Thank you so much for having us here, Albert.
You're welcome. Thank you for being here.
So we're in an interesting section because there's specifically really bright blue suits right here that you guys sew, that are sewn, and then red, white, and blue fabric. Is this actually representative of a U.S. contract that you have?
Yes, we ship that to U.S. This is one of the largest contracts we normally have right now for the U.S. But of course, we do other things in there. We do that for the Department of National Defense for years and years. This started in 1950 doing something for D&D and continues on, and we're still doing that for D&D. But what worries us in there is this kind of order we have. You see the blue and the red. That's shipped to the United States, and that's going to be 25% more. So the consumer has to pay basically 50% more, not 25. When you add 25 to it, the markup another 50%, so it's really 50%. What worries us in there, is it really going to be sustainable for the end consumers to have that kind of increase or not? That's what worries us. We'll also import from the United States, and that whatever we import is going to cost us another 25%. Then the end consumers, whatever we sell to, there's going to be another, end of thing, another 50%. So it's really worrying for us and worrying. Everybody knows about it from our employees in there. Not everybody knows the details, as you know, not only those details known to
Yeah.
people who listens to radio and
Yeah.
other things. Yeah.
So the 25% tariffs, if there's counter tariffs, if you import stuff from the States. So we're talking about tariffs both ways. There's a work bell going nearing the top of the clock or change and shift. And then you're saying, the further cost will be because otherwise, you're not going to make any profit or manage to live as a business.
Well, if the customer accepted the price, because we'll continue on and we'll still remain with a profit, but the customer has to accept the increase we're proposing to them. That's the problem.
How big of a contract is it? Is it $3 to $4 million the U.S. contract?
This one is about a year, about $3 to $4 million. So sometimes it's going to go higher than that. Depends on the customers and what their needs is, because it goes to the United States and then distributors around the world.
And what's your conversations like with those companies in the States to try to encourage them to keep doing business with you here in Manitoba?
Well, there is not the product comes from the United States. Some of it doesn't come direct to Peerless. It goes to another factory where they do another operation to it, lamination, for example, to make it waterproof and breathable. So they couldn't have to pay more, and they couldn't pass the increase on to us as we get the order. So as of March 4th in there, anything we buy for Department of National Defense or we buy from this customer is going to go up by 25%. It's not only 25%. 20 people, they say 25% only. It's really not 25. 25 plus the markup, the handling of the thing, everything goes up. The 25%, you have to mark it up because you were making a profit, and now you want to make a profit on the 25% too.
How many people would lose their jobs if that contract goes away?
Well, I can estimate that if this contract we lost it, it's going to be a severe in the company. I would say about 30% of the people will lose their job.
How many people do you employ here?
87.
Okay. You were saying that some people have a sense, if they, some workers have a sense of what's going on here, if they follow the news and such, others may not. What toll is the uncertainty taking on you and on workers?
Well, uncertainty, it is very severe on all of us in there, on the company and the future of the company and the future of many jobs also, if that happened. But again, that's also depends on the customer we sell to, if he's going to accept the increase or not accepting the increase. The product is a very unique product, very, very unique, and I believe the customer will go on and accept any increases because it's a worldwide situation. It's not something happening to Peerless or to certain manufacturers, happening to everybody across the board.
I want to ask you about the product itself then. So these are lab tech suits, I think, that are going to the States. You're talking about your Department of National Defense contracts with, the Canadian military here. You can see the camo fabric here.
Yeah.
I'm just going to hold up some of the stuff. This is just a pillow for a worker station, but I just want to show the fabrics and such here. So you work with a lot of high quality textiles that are protective and such.
We design and developed everything for Department of National Defense, the Army, Navy, Air Force, RCMP. We developed every items for the for D&D, for the combat, and we deliver to them hundreds and hundreds of millions of dollars.
What would you like to see from the federal government or the provincial government if these tariffs come to fruition, if they happen in 12 days? What do you need?
I don't know if the government can help. If we're selling to D&D, I believe it's going to be okay. I believe, because this is a problem right across Canada, and they're aware of a D&D. I sent conversation. I sent an email to them yesterday, and I said the next order we're not going to be the same price because we're importing that product, and that's going to go up by 25% plus. So expect an increase. So I haven't had an answer today or yesterday yet, but I believe this is something for the soldiers. They will abide by the increase, and they'll do that. And I don't think there's a problem with D&D.
So I'm not hearing any hope there, Albert, that this is not going to happen in 12 days. Are you looking at this you have to plan your business around this happening, I guess?
Well, is it going to happen on March the 4th or not? It's not definite yet. Looks like it's not definite. We don't know. But more likely is, because every day you hear something about President Trump adding this and adding that, and vehicles 100% and things like that. So it looks like it's going to happen.
Has this changed how you feel about doing business with the United States?
No, it doesn't change. All we have to go by what the rules are and what our government, provincial and federal government, going to do, and how they're going to help the manufacturers like us in there. And we're not the only manufacturers going to need help. A lot of manufacturers going to need help.
So the Premier has floated the idea of a tax deferral. Other provinces are putting away sort of funds that might help in the future. Would a tax deferral, just as one idea, would that help you?
Of course, every little bit thing helps in that. Small manufacturers, they can benefit from anything the Premier talks about in there, and we appreciate everything that our provincial government doing.
How does this compare to things that you faced in the past that have been challenging for your business? Is this a...
We didn't have any, like, our business is a very unique business, and we cater to the Department of National Defense on 3 levels, and there are hundreds and hundreds of millions.
So you still were doing that during the pandemic, for example?
We're still doing that, yeah. We did that through the COVID in there. We did well in there. Continued, and we continue. As you see, there's a lot of them in the factory in here we're doing something like that, hyper shirt for them, especially for the special troops, all kinds of things we're still doing, and chemical warfare suits, all that.
Yeah. How just as a last question, what's this like for you as a human being? Because you're talking about maybe having to lose, I think you said 30% of a workforce potentially.
That's
and then we're talking to people here that they've worked here 50 years, some people.
That's what personally will affect me, because I've been so long with the company, it's 55 years in there, and all the people in the factory in there, I know them, I know their issues, I know their problem. If there is a problem, we're there to help them. And of course, every time you lose a job, affects the family in general in there. Those people in there work to provide food on the table in there, so they're going to go and find another job. How long it takes them to find another job for us, if that happens, God forbid that. We hope everything is going to remain status quo, and we hope everything will stay the way it is right now, and those orders will be accepted by the people in the United States, and the increase. And as far as the D&D and the government, what are we doing? I think the D&D will accept any increase.
Thank you so much for having CBC
welcome.
here. Really appreciate it.
My pleasure.
That is Albert Alessi, who's been live here on his factory floor. He's the owner and CEO here of Peerless Garments on Notre Dame. The Premier live here, also at Peerless, going to join us live after 8. Right now, let's go to Heather Wells for other developing news.
Good morning. We are starting to learn more about a shooting yesterday afternoon in the William White area. Police were called to Manitoba and Mackenzie around 4:30 in the afternoon. One person was taken to hospital. Another is in custody. And a candidate to be the next leader of Manitoba's PC says there is porn in schools. Wally Dowdrich says there are school libraries with porn. He's brought it up at the leadership debate last night in Brandon and says his leadership rival, Abi Khan, could have stopped it. We'll hear more in our next local news coming up at 8:30.
All right, thank you, Heather.
You're welcome.
Well, in Winnipeg, the extreme cold warning has finally ended for Manitoba, I should say. Still doesn't mean it's warm out there. It just means maybe we're going to turn a corner now. So we'll start that today, minus 22 right now. Later today, though, it's going to start to get warmer into tomorrow. A huge difference. So tomorrow, we're looking at a high of minus 9. So hang on, everybody, one more day. We're doing well in traffic. Haven't had any major calls to report, but 788-3093 if you do need to reach us. Still ahead on the show this morning, from gloves and workwear, windows and airplane parts, pork, steel, buses, hydroelectricity. We've got a lot of goods that could be affected by these U.S. tariffs that are proposed that could go into effect in 12 days. Today, as we continue off the manufacturing floor at Peerless Garments, we'll sort through what's at stake with the Premier. We'll ask him more about what happened in Washington last week. Stay with us. This is CBC's Information Radio.
Today on Q with Tom Power.
Imagine what a compliment it must be when Johnny Cash decides to record one of your songs. That's what happened to the singer-songwriter Will Oldham. He'll tell you the story of sitting with Johnny as he recorded his song and how a chance meeting that day led to Will's brand new album.
And that I see
That's coming up on Q, followed by Commotion with Elamine Abdel Mahmoud on CBC Radio 1, the CBC Listen app, and everywhere you get your podcasts.
The CBC News is next. Coming up in half an hour, it's The Current.
with Matt Galloway.
U.S. President Donald Trump has his eye on the Arctic. We will hear from the three northern premiers about how they are reasserting Canadian sovereignty and why the Arctic is not for sale. Premiers of Yukon, Nunavut, and the Northwest Territories coming up on The Current.
This is World Report. Good morning, I'm Martina Fitzgerald. Hamas says it is ready to release all remaining hostages at the same time if Israel will commit to a second phase of the ceasefire agreement. The Palestinian militant group made the announcement this morning just before handing over the bodies of 4 hostages, including children. The CBC's Sasha Petrusik brings us the latest from Jerusalem.
The music may have been upbeat in Khan Yunis this morning, but everything else was somber. Under cold rain, 4 black coffins carried by Hamas fighters, 2 of the caskets bearing the Bibas children, 4-year-old Ariel and his 9-month-old brother. They were kidnapped along with their mother, Shiri. She was in a 3rd coffin, a neighbor from their kibbutz in a 4th. Hamas says they died in an airstrike in southern Gaza. The Israeli army killed them, says Mujahideen, a Hamas fighter. Others in the crowd watching mourn Palestinian children who also died. Right until this week, many in Israel hoped the Bibas children had survived, says family friend Yiftach Cohen.
Shiri and the kids became a symbol. I still hope that they will be alive.
A symbol of hope for many in Israel, not knowing how many of the remaining 69 hostages survived 16 months in captivity. A shocking day, a day of grief, says Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu. Many here blame him for dragging out ceasefire negotiations and the hostage releases. But today, as some gathered in Hostage Square and others lined the route home for the coffins, the focus was on the youngest ones lost. Sasha Petrusik, CBC News, Jerusalem.
Federal employees in the U.S. are nervously watching the Department of Government Efficiency, also known as DOGE. The cost-cutting body has been slashing jobs and budgets across government agencies. Reportedly, the Pentagon is next. Cameron McIntosh is watching developments from our bureau in Washington. Good morning, Cam. What can you tell us?
The Washington Post is reporting it obtained a memo from Secretary of Defense Pete Hegseth calling for 8% cuts to the Pentagon budget for each of the next 5 years. Now, the Pentagon's budget is about $850 billion, so this is almost $70 billion a year. It's a lot of money. Now, Hegseth says these cuts aren't supposed to affect service personnel, people in uniform, nor Trump priorities like securing the southern border. But Hegseth says spending should reflect America's shifting priorities towards China, away from Ukraine and Europe.
Stark strategic realities prevent the United States of America from being primarily focused on the security of Europe.
Hegseth is telling the Pentagon to have a list of cuts, again, almost $70 billion worth, ready for Monday.
Do you mind, Cam, if we talk about the influence of Elon Musk's Department of Government Efficiency in all of this?
Yeah, so these cuts are outside of DOGE, but yes, Musk is looking at the Pentagon, again, targeting probationary employees, people who have been in their jobs less than 3 years. Now, those could be new hires. The Department of Defense has about 900,000 civilian employees. Many of them are veterans. DOGE is trying to cut 10% of the federal workforce. It's already responsible for thousands of government firings across numerous departments amid criticisms of very little transparency and lots of questions over how decisions are even being made and who's making them, along with plenty of legal questions over Musk's authority, who wasn't even confirmed by Congress to be doing any of this. While President Trump has said Musk is in charge, a White House court filing says he's not even connected to DOGE. Martina?
Cameron McIntosh is in Washington for us this morning. Thanks, Cam.
My pleasure.
Musicians and dancers from the Turtle Mountain Band of the Chippewa tribe welcome Leonard Peltier home. The 80-year-old activist spent nearly 50 years in prison after being convicted of killing 2 FBI agents in South Dakota in 1975. Peltier fled to Canada before his trial 2 years later. He was extradited back to the U.S., found guilty, and given 2 life sentences. In one of his final acts as U.S. President, Joe Biden commuted Peltier's sentence. Peltier was emotional during a homecoming ceremony last night.
I'm so proud of the showing and support you've given me. I got a hard time keeping myself from crying.
Leonard Peltier was released from a Florida prison on Tuesday. He will serve the remainder of his sentence under house arrest in North Dakota. Alberta Premier Danielle Smith is defending her government in the face of healthcare corruption claims. It's accused of applying political pressure when the province's health authority awarded contracts. Smith confronted the controversy yesterday, and as Terry Reith reports, she pointed a finger at the health authority.
I want to address the procurement issues at Alberta Health Services.
Danielle Smith shot back at allegations of government interference in awarding contracts for chartered surgical facilities, promising a thorough investigation. But she also claimed the province's health authority, AHS, was resistant to using privately owned, publicly funded centres to help ease a surgical backlog. She says her health minister, Adriana LaGrange, and other government officials were doing their job.
The only role that the minister or government had was saying, "Are you done yet? Have you got to the finish line yet?"
The allegations stem from a lawsuit filed by the former CEO of the health authority, Athana Menzalopoulos, who says she was fired after she raised concerns about the procurement process 2 days before she was to meet with the Auditor General. The entire board of AHS was also fired 3 weeks later. Alberta's NDP opposition is not relenting. Leader Naheed Nenshi is calling for a public inquiry led by a judge, and he wants the health minister fired.
This isn't going away, Premier. You may think you're making it go away. It is not going away. Albertans deserve to know how we're managing their health system.
An internal investigation, which will involve an outside agency, will take months, says the Premier. In the meantime, she has suspended the awarding of new contracts until providers have been cleared of any wrongdoing. Terry Reith, CBC News, Edmonton.
Canadians are about to get their first look at a plan to modernize the government's mandate for CBC Radio-Canada. The mandate has not been reviewed since 1991. Since then, the media landscape has changed radically, and updating it is one of the assigned duties for Pascale St-Onge as Heritage Minister. She will unveil her vision to the public in about 90 minutes. One key proposal is to create a law ensuring that Radio-Canada's French services are independent of the CBC. In Nova Scotia, the calls to better address intimate partner violence are becoming louder. Advocates rallied in Halifax demanding more provincial funding and support for victims, including in recent months 6 women in Nova Scotia. As Kayla Hounsell reports, despite being invited, the Premier did not show up.
No more silence!
Bundled against a cold winter day, they marched in the streets demanding action.
End the violence!
From October to January, 6 women in Nova Scotia were killed by their intimate partners.
Let's remember, Peyton Pick.
Peyton Pick was the most recent. The 22-year-old's body found in a home that had been set on fire. Her boyfriend charged with second-degree murder and arson with disregard to human life. Her mother, Norma Jean Pick, is also calling for change, inviting CBC News into her daughter's celebration of life, hoping to raise awareness.
She was taken from us January 11th of this year by someone she loved and trusted.
Together we rise!
Advocates are calling for everything from early intervention to education in schools and changes in legislation. Christina Fifield is a trauma therapist.
So we're asking Tim Houston and members of our current government to really prioritize core funding.
She says she invited Nova Scotia Premier Tim Houston to speak at the rally, but he didn't respond.
I get a lot of invites, to be honest. I mean, it's a day of the legislature. It's pretty scheduled in advance, but I'm happy to meet with people.
Gwendolyn Brown is a survivor.
It hurts my heart that he's not here.
Demonstrators hope their voices will be loud enough to prevent even one more death. Kayla Hounsell, CBC News, Halifax.
And that is the latest national and international news from World Report. I'm Martina Fitzgerald. This is CBC News.
Every day, 70,000 people come to work in the manufacturing industry in Manitoba. We're live at Peerless Garments.
My name is Long Bui. I work here for 44 years.
And right now we're actually standing beside a product that you ship to the U.S. A lot of red fabric and blue fabric. Red, white, and blue fabric, actually. So if these tariffs come on this materials that you turn into clothing, what impact would that have on you, on your day-to-day here?
Yes, we might lose the contract, we might lose the job, and the people will have no work.
So let's remember what we're talking about here. We're talking about jobs. We're talking about people. We're talking about our livelihoods. We're talking about our friends and neighbors. So this morning, let's talk as Manitobans. Our whole show has been devoted to looking at what the potential effect of these proposed tariffs in 12 days, if they come out of the States, 25% could actually mean for our local economy and for workers, like that gentleman you just heard from who works here at Peerless. This half hour on the program, we've been hearing from the makers. We've been hearing about how this could cause serious disruption in businesses. We've also been hearing from others about how they're hopeful that we can stick this out. We're going to be okay. The Premier was just at the White House trying to make a friendly pitch for the trade war not to happen. How is he preparing now that we're close to seeing what's going to happen with these tariffs? Stay tuned. Lob Canoe, the Premier of Manitoba, live at Peerless. Standing right here beside me among the sewing machines this morning, so we'll talk to him in a moment. Right now, let's go and see what's happening otherwise in news, and that is back to CBC, where Heather Wells is with our headlines.
Good morning. Well, one person was taken to hospital. Another is in custody after a shooting near Manitoba Avenue in Mackenzie. It happened yesterday around 4:30 in the afternoon. Police were called to that area of William White after reports of shots being fired. We'll tell you what we know so far. As well, some students at the University of Manitoba say they would like to see more Indigenous representation in faculty and in content taught in their courses. Those stories and more in our next local news at 8:30.
All right, thanks, Heather. And the weather now, Abby?
Yes, it's a frigid morning across the province, but sunshine will definitely dominate. We still have that extreme cold warnings in parts of West and the Parkland regions. Right now, Winnipeg sits at minus 22, feeling like minus 32 this morning, but warming up to minus 15 by the afternoon period. And then for tomorrow, we'll be reaching minus 8 on the increasing clouds.
Everyone get your shorts, because you know someone's going to do that. If we hit 3 degrees on Monday, there's going to be patios open because it's
for sure.
Finally. All right, let's talk traffic. Grant and Harrow, one small thing to mention here, there's a damaged car blocking the eastbound curb lane. Keep left to pass, although right now there are no delays. Time is 8:12. You're listening to CBC. So we've been here all morning, live in the middle of the sewing machines and the walls of threads, rows of threads, spools of thread, all of the different products. Many of these, shipping across Canada, but also shipping to the States. We're at the factory for Peerless Garments on Notre Dame. Now, this is a reminder that while our local manufacturing sector has shrunk over many years, due to free trade in the global market, there are still some items that are made here in Manitoba, however, lots of them. There's 1,400 companies that employ some 70,000 people in this province when it comes to manufacturing. But let's talk about what we export. Let's talk about these businesses: gloves, workwear, windows, buses, airplane parts. But what will happen in 12 days if the U.S. makes good on this threat of 25% tariffs on exports to the States? How will industries in our province be affected, and how immediately?
Manitoba produces over 8 million pigs a year, and 90% of that is export, either as pork products or live animals into the United States.
A big export in Manitoba is hydropower, electricity. Even 10% more might squeeze Manitoba Hydro's ability to secure large-scale, long-term power sales in the U.S. market.
Let's worry less about what's going on south of the border and the potential threats and the Trump talk on a regular basis. Let's focus on what things that we can control.
So those are some of the voices of business leaders and analysts that CBC Manitoba has spoken with about tariffs. Now, not to mention, we've also heard from other businesses that are in an interesting position of having manufacturing plants on both sides of the border. Now, as you likely know, Premier Wab Kinew was in Washington last week visiting the White House with all of the premiers. He joins us now. He's on the factory floor at Peerless. Good morning.
Good morning. It's great to be here.
Thank you for being here. We got to tell people what you're wearing.
I'm wearing the bright red Team Canada jersey. We just heard the weather forecast, but I think they should have added there's going to be raining pucks on the American net tonight as Team Canada joins the Four Nations game.
So this, you can also wear this just as appropriate for what we're talking about.
Yeah.
You were just down south in Washington.
Canada.
What was that like? I mean, you're taking a friendly approach, but then you also said if we need to get tough, we will. What does getting tough from a Manitoba perspective look like, Premier?
Well, I think we've shown that. When we said that we were going to take American booze off the shelves of the liquor mart, and we coordinated that with the other provinces that have public liquor, like Ontario, Nova Scotia, etc. For Manitoba alone, and I was a little surprised to see how much American beer and liquor we drink, but it means $80 million we're pulling out of the American economy just with that decision alone. So I think first and foremost, we want to use this window where there are no tariffs to try and make the case and prevent the tariffs from being put into place. But we've also shown that when we need to stick up for ourselves, we have tools in the toolbox that we can use. So we got to take a balanced approach right now because, as you say, we're talking about livelihoods, we're talking about jobs, we're talking about our economy, and the average family being able to put food on the table.
So March 12th, tariffs, March 4th, if they come into effect, immediately what happens? Liquor off shelves again, and what else happens in terms of what we might notice in Manitoba?
Well, I think we're going to have to respond to the situation. Like, this whole period is uncharted territory for everyone. There have been tariffs in the past, but that was during a time where the trend was towards more free trade. Now we're seeing the reverse happen, right? And so all of us, I think, are going to have to be flexible, responsive, and we're going to have to work together with the Americans on things that work for us according to our Manitoban and Canadian values, like maybe cracking down on fentanyl. I think nobody opposes that. But on other things where we have to stick up for ourselves, if people are coming for our manufacturing jobs, then we need to push back, and we need to push back strongly. I do think this whole situation is going to come down to manufacturing. You are very right to be here and to talk about this sector of our economy, because what we're seeing with all the global trends around the economy is people want manufacturing. Manufacturing means good jobs. It means economic power for whichever regions have that. So we got to stick up for our manufacturing here in Manitoba.
Can you share any details with manufacturers? And we had, the head of exports on for the Prairies talking earlier this morning, Terry Shaw, as well.
Right.
Some of the things they were hoping that you might commit to, or might be at least confirm that you're thinking about still, are changes in procurement, maybe not having U.S. companies bid on contracts that will be valuable for companies here in Manitoba to keep or have, or also tax deferrals. You've talked about that for companies should tariffs come into place. What's on the table, and can you confirm anything, or at least confirm what are you looking at as a plan to help businesses?
Yeah, in terms of looking at it, all of those things are things that are actively underway. The procurement stuff, we were working on it prior to the whole tariff situation, just trying to focus more on supporting Manitoba businesses, Manitoba workers, with the money that government spends in the community. We're definitely reviewing some contracts that we have right now that are coming up for renewal and making decisions about where are we going to spend our money as Manitobans, Manitoba taxpayers going forward. The tax deferral thing, if there are tariffs applied, that is one of the tools that we'll be using to support businesses.
So that will happen?
We don't want to get maybe too far ahead of ourselves here, because I don't want to give up the ghost. I don't want to concede that tariffs are going to happen.
Okay.
But definitely that's one of the tools that we're looking at very strongly, and then some other supports to make sure that the average person out there is going to be able to weather this period of uncertainty. I've been saying we're going to have to ride the wave. I'm very confident Manitoba is going to get through this. We got this, is what I would say, but that doesn't mean it's going to be smooth sailing. There's going to be ups and downs. There's going to be curveballs thrown at us. There's going to be things that are unexpected, and so we're just going to have to be responsive and support our local economy, support our jobs here in Manitoba.
So what's going to happen for Manitoba businesses that might be looking for markets outside the U.S.? We've continued to do interviews about interprovincial trade, changing regulations.
And that's moving along.
Where will we benefit then, Premier? Like, when you say moving along, who are we moving along with, and where would Manitoba businesses benefit?
So in terms of other provinces and territories, I think one of the things that looks like it's going to happen relatively, maybe as one of those lower hanging fruits, a relatively straightforward thing, is direct-to-consumer alcohol. Right now, you as a Manitoban, you can order liquor products from other provinces, beer, but a Manitoba brewer or a Manitoba distiller, they can't ship to someone in Ontario. as an example. So we think that that's probably one of the ones that's going to get brought down first, and then that's going to open up opportunities for people who work as a beer maker, a craft liquor maker, what have you. After that, there's questions around the trucking industry, around credential recognition, around labor mobility. I think those things will probably move forward as well. So our Minister, Jamie Moses, is hard at work on that.
How much do we need an east-west power grid?
It'd be huge for Manitoba. I mean, we are a base load electricity exporter. We have the most valuable thing in the world right now. And again, if you look at the Trump administration's moves so far, it's all about base load power. And what I mean by base load power is power that flows 24/7. So wind and solar are good, but it's only when the sun shines, it's only when the wind blows. But hydro, natural gas, nuclear, that power flows 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 365 days a year, no matter what. And because of AI and ChatGPT, everything like that, these huge demands of power, that there is a global race going on for baseload power, and we have that in Manitoba. So that puts us in an advantageous position. It puts us in a strong position because we have what other jurisdictions want.
But not if we can't get it to anyone. So, which is
we have the transmission infrastructure to go to the States, to go west. Of course, if there is an east-west grid, that would open up more opportunities for us. Yeah, absolutely. It would be a big infrastructure investment that would help our province.
A21, Premier Wab Canoe on the floor of Peerless Garments here with us for our show, focusing on the proposed tariffs that could happen here in just 12 days. At the White House last week, I want to ask you about some of the things. Some folks were feeling like, some analysts and critics were feeling a little bit like, maybe I shouldn't use the word critics. Some were questioning whether or not the meetings that you had and all the premiers going together, obviously that was significant. It was, unprecedented. Yeah. But some were questioning whether it really made any difference. What did you feel about the meetings you had and whether it made any difference really in terms of having voices be heard?
I think it was good to be there. And I think it does make a difference because here's the thing that we have to remember about the Trump administration. The people we're meeting with still don't have their business cards. Some of the people we're going to be negotiating, like Howard Lutnick was only confirmed yesterday. The U.S. Trade Representative has still not been confirmed. So I know there's so much uncertainty and there's so much at stake that everyone wants to get the immediate fix so that we can just go back to the way that things were before. But we have to understand that the U.S. administration is still in a startup phase. So for us as the premiers to go down there and to get in on the ground floor, if you will, is building a foundation that we can go back to when we get to the negotiating table, when we get to those next steps.
You saw Elon Musk in the hallway too, is that right? This is for listeners' benefit because a lot of people are wondering how present that man really is in the government.
Well, that was my reaction, is like, oh, just like on TV, like we're leaving the White House and we trip over the richest man in the world, if you will.
So, did you talk to him?
Yeah, to be honest, in the first instance, I kind of wanted to size him up, so I went up and, introduced myself. Hi, I'm Wab Canoe, I'm the Premier of Manitoba. How tall is this guy? We're about the same height, this and that, just some very basic things. Spoke to him for a few minutes, and then some people started asking him for photos, and I decided I just kind of wanted to keep my distance, so that was that.
Yeah. The budget's coming up here in Manitoba. Right. It's in April, but other provinces...
It'll be in March, actually.
Oh, it'll be in March?
Yeah.
Okay, I had an April date. Thank you for correcting me there. Other provinces like BC, I'm sure you're aware of this, they're preparing for tariffs. They're canceling a $1,000 grocery rebate in BC. They're freezing hiring of some public service positions. And in Nova Scotia, their budget is... They've almost put forth, if this happens, if this doesn't budget, they've got a $200 million contingency fund. How are we preparing in Manitoba fiscally? And what do what's happening behind the scenes in preparation for our budget?
So we have the budget as though there are no tariffs, and then we've got a contingency plan where if there are tariffs. We've done a lot of modeling both in-house and getting some experts from outside of government to help us answer the question, what would be the impact on our GDP? What would be the impact on government revenues? So when the budget comes out, you're going to see a lot of that. And you're going to see, I guess, basically the two forks in the road. Here's the budget if all goes well, and here's the budget where we have to stand up to support manufacturers and Manitobans in a very direct way. What I would say about the overall direction that we're taking, though, is we don't want to make the situation worse by tightening the purse strings in a way that would harm Manitobans. So as we head into a period of economic uncertainty...
What does that mean? Does that mean you're not going to
We have to keep people working.
Okay.
Yeah, and like healthcare, for example. We're hiring up in healthcare. We need to keep doing that. That's going to benefit Manitobans. It also has an economic rationale. When it comes to things like Manitoba Hydro, We need to keep investing in Manitoba.
So you're not going to
hydro.
freeze positions and such like BC. We used that example. That's you
correct.
saying that
Yeah.
you're not going to do that here. I'm wondering what you have to say about the Port of Churchill and its role in all of this, because it's huge in what way, and how could it be? What are you looking at there specifically, and also when it comes to sovereignty, what are you thinking about?
Well, we're investing in it. First and foremost, we just teamed up with the feds for nearly $80 million in new investment. The feds are investing in the rail line that connects to the rest of the rail network in North America. We're investing in the port so that we can get minerals, critical minerals. We can get agricultural products onto the ships. Because there's so much uncertainty, so much risk right now, there's a bunch of different potential paths forward. But any one of those paths forward, the Port of Churchill would benefit us. So let's say things go well with the United States of America. Well, then the Port of Churchill is about Arctic sovereignty. It's about us having a presence in the region where we can say we're a strong security partner working in this very risky international environment right now. If things don't go as well, like maybe the tariffs get applied and we want to diversify our exports, well, then the Port of Churchill is about reaching the European Union. It means that the grain farmer, the canola farmer, can get to the EU more quickly than using the Port of Thunder Bay. And then no matter what happens, when we're talking about building up northern Manitoba, serving those bayline communities along the rail line and serving the community of Churchill, which is a major tourism draw, that makes sense for us in terms of Trump-proofing our economy and investing in Manitobans. So no matter which way things go, I think the Port of Churchill is a really crucial investment for our province.
Trump-proofing our economy.
Yeah.
A new term.
Well, it's something that we have to think about. We have a strong diversified economy here in Manitoba, but we've seen over the last couple months that there is a huge amount of risk when the United States of America changes. And so in order to protect jobs today and for our kids' generation, we need to make some really smart investments in our manufacturing, in our energy, and in the way that we reach markets around the world.
Are you working with numbers of how many jobs we could potentially lose if these tariffs go in? We heard Albert Alessi earlier this morning just talking about one of his contracts, saying potentially there could be 30% losses to his workers. We've heard from others as well. Some businesses were talking to us off record. They didn't want to go on the air. They're nervous. They're tense.
Yep.
Are you working with numbers of how many people you think could be at risk of losing their jobs?
Well, we've got forecasts, as I was telling you about the budget that we're creating right now. We've got forecasts in terms of GDP, government revenue, employment, different sectors. What I can tell you that I think it makes sense for us to share right now is we do have to look out for manufacturing. When we look across our economy and we think about which are the sectors that are most exposed.
Is that
to
because
trade,
if you've got a plant here and in the States, you're making more money at the one in the States, especially if you factor in the dollar? It's going to be pretty hard to convince a business owner to stay here, even if they're waving the red and white flag.
But part of what you're saying there too, when the dollar goes down, Canadian exports get more attractive, so we can export more. So that's why we have to ride the wave, because it's so unpredictable in terms of how all these different factors are going to play out. But I think one thing that we know for sure is everyone in the world wants manufacturing jobs. We have a lot of good ones, whether it's in garments, aerospace, advanced manufacturing, tractors, steel, everything. We need to protect those. This is going to be one of the big determinants of who has a strong economy for the next generation, is who can stand up for their manufacturing and add more manufacturing jobs.
Premier Rob Canoe, thank you very much for being here today. It's our regular monthly interview. It landed, of course, when we're here at Peerless Garments. We appreciate you being on the factory floor.
Go Team Canada.
Yeah, enjoy the game tonight.
You too.
Premier Rob Canoe live with us on CBC 89.3 FM, 990 AM on the app and on YouTube. We've been streaming all morning. So we are wondering, as you've been listening to the show this morning and leaning into what the Premier had to share, if you're a business owner out there, if you're an employee out there, maybe you work in manufacturing, maybe you work in another sector that you have, are worried about that could be affected by these potential tariffs. We'd really love to hear your stories as we head to that critical date of March 4th. You can call us on our listener line at 788-3205. 788-3205 is where you can call us. You can also write to us anytime on Facebook. That is my Marcy Marcusa page. Eastbound curb lane, you can still reach us. That traffic line is 788-3093. I'm Marcy Marcusa. Marcy Marcusa with CBC and our team here at the show. We're live at Peerless Garments, and next, it's your 8:30 CBC News.
This is CBC News. Good morning. I'm Heather Wells in Winnipeg. At 8:30, it's -22, and that extreme cold warning has ended for Winnipeg, But it continues for Brandon and western Manitoba, still under an extreme cold warning in that part of southern Manitoba this morning. In Winnipeg today, sunny with a high of -22. One person was taken to hospital and another was arrested after a shooting near Manitoba Avenue and Mackenzie. Happened around 4:30 yesterday afternoon. Police were called to an area in the William White neighborhood about reports of shots being fired. They found one injured person in unstable condition. They were taken to hospital and upgraded to stable. A suspect now is in custody. More details are expected from police later today. A candidate to be next leader of Manitoba PC says there is porn in this province's schools. Wally Dowdrich says there are school libraries with books describing bestiality and incest. He brought it up at a leadership debate last night in Brandon. Dowdrich wouldn't say where these books are located, but says his leadership rival, Abi Khan, could have stopped it.
It was brought to his attention when he was Minister of Heritage Culture, and he did nothing.
Khan says Dowdrich's comments are factually incorrect. He says municipalities or school boards have the autonomy to choose which books belong in their libraries. Khan says the former PC government tried to develop rules around putting books about sensitive topics into age-appropriate areas of libraries, but the PCs were defeated in the 2023 election before those rules could be finalized. The University of Manitoba says its goal is to make sure every faculty has Indigenous knowledge embedded in its content, even if there's no required course. Todd Duhamel is the Associate Vice President, Indigenous Research and Academic. He says no one should ever graduate from an institution without having that knowledge.
We really want Indigenous knowledge to be embedded in everything that we do. It shouldn't be in one class, you're done, you get a check mark, you move on and never have to think about it again. The reality is in Manitoba, 1 in 5 people are Indigenous, First Nations, Métis, or Inuit. We need to know the shared history that we have together.
Duhamel says the University of Manitoba is also always aiming to bring in qualified Indigenous scholars. He says it's important to keep listening to feedback from students who want to see more Indigenous representation in their studies. A Winnipeg psychologist is hearing from some travelers anxious about Monday's crash of a Delta Airlines plane. 21 people were injured when that plane from Minneapolis crashed and flipped while landing in Toronto. It was the 4th major aviation incident in North America in less than a month. Clinical psychologist Dr. Rahman Abdulrahman says it is normal for people to have concerns, especially at a time of heightened overall anxiety in the world.
Watching these plane crashes, it's understandable that people are going to feel anxious to fly. But we want to be careful that, those worries don't lead into significant anxiety disorders or avoidances that start to impact our everyday lives and our ability to carry out what we need to do.
One aviation expert calls the string of crashes an unfortunate coincidence in timing. Scott Hamilton tells CBC's The Current, air travel today is safer than it's ever been due to, quote, experience and lessons learned from decades of accidents. A storied goaltender is weighing in on tonight's Four Nations face-off final between Canada and the United States.
Connor Hellebuyck, has a history and an outstanding history. Jordan Binnington has been more up and down.
Ken Dryden, Hockey Hall of Famer and former federal cabinet minister, on what to expect from netminders tonight. It is a game charged with a mix of national pride and politics. And Winnipeggers will be torn since the Jets' own Connor Hellebuyck is in net for the U.S. Dryden says anything could happen.
In an individual game, who knows? I mean, the moment may be too much for Connor Hellebuyck. Maybe Jordan Binnington will absolutely rise to the occasion. I mean, that's why we play these games. That's why we watch them.
And you can watch tonight at 7 Central Time as Canada faces off against the U.S. in the final of the Four Nations face-off. You can find more Manitoba news as well. Just head to cbc.ca/Manitoba.
All right, thanks very much.
Yep.
Am I on here? I'm just not hearing myself.
Not hearing you.
Marcy, your mic is far away.
Something's wrong.
Yeah, there you are.
Oh, that's okay. You know what? Take mine.
Hey. Whoa, now
Hey,
I'm
ho.
way too loud. Hang on, we're having major issues here. Apologies, we're trying to wrap the show. Abby, why don't you just do weather?
Yeah,
please?
it's still a frigid start across the province, though we have plenty of sunshine in the forecast today. Winnipeg sits at minus 22 this morning, feeling like minus 32 with the wind chill factored in. But we do warm up to minus 15 by the afternoon period. Then the wind will be picking up, making it breezy this evening. In Brandon, you see a high of minus 17. Dauphin warms up to minus 14. Thompson and Churchill will be at minus 14. Warmer temperatures will be arriving Friday, and Winnipeg will be reaching minus 8. The clouds will move in. We'll see a mix of rain and snow by Sunday.
All right, I believe I am on. I hope that you can hear me okay. And
Yes.
I apologize. We went all morning without a technical issue, and we're just having I may sound very overmodulated.
I can just hear the machine
and
in the
so
background.
I would like to thank Albert Alessi and Peerless Garments and Corey Funk, and as well Heather Wells and Megan Ketcherson, Chris Armstrong, Alana Cole, and Darren Bernhardt in our studios control rooms this morning, as well obviously Kevin Ipatebo and Abby Adeyemi, Issa Kixon and Jim Agapito for their work on some items on the program. I'm Marcy Marcusa. Thank you so much for joining us for our special program focusing on manufacturing from here at Peerless Garments. We will all see what happens together on March 4th. And then with that further deadline, March 12th on steel and aluminum. So we're thinking about just Selkirk with your steel plant there. Take care, be well, Manitoba. Thanks for listening, and we'll talk to you again tomorrow. That's it for our special live show on location. If you have a community studio to pitch where you'd like to hear CBC's Morning Show live, let us know. You can leave that on our listener line, 788-3205. Take care. The Current's coming up next.